Sword of Coming Chapter 843. The upload was late, sorry. The night was heavy and a Liang was nowhere to be seen in an instant. Only the sword light shone everywhere. When a single person shoots a sword, there is the atmosphere of many gods and methods in the ancient battlefield. Together with Zhou Xian, she is responsible for running the new makeup of the Great Array. As the direct disciple of the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain, senior sister Liz Hen, she quickly looked around and displayed a magical power, her eyes gleaming, precious light flowing, even the long river of time, and there are clues in the path of Yin and Ming, but Exin Zhuang still can't find the trace of the man. It's no wonder that in the early years he was able to slip away in that dangerous scene of big monsters. Zhou Xian had drawn an unsheathed long sword from the sword box, clamped the blade with his 2 fingers, and swiped it swiftly towards the tip of the sword, as if peeling off a layer of immortal relics. The sword light turned into a thunder light, and hit the bright electric light. Together at the same time the heart voice reminded, "Don't look for it, you and I only care about the formation of the abbot and lead the sword with peace of mind." Xinzhuang immediately converged her mind when she heard the words, offering an inconspicuous bag, shook it gently, and the clouds rose and filled quickly, as if they had borrowed a wind and rain with the ancient Fengshen rain master to envelop her in it, and the clouds and mist were shaking. It seems that it is not the land of the abbot, but in fact there is a cave, a vast expanse of wind and rain, thousands of miles away, like an alternative mustered supernatural power, helping Xinzhuang hide in a huge lake, even if Aoyang can cut open the landscape of Zhou Xian with a single sword. Prohibition cannot cut her real body. The wild great monsters who besieged Aoyang this time, it seemed that if anyone didn't have 1 or 2 fairy soldiers in their hands, they would not have the face to go out and show up here on the battlefield. Xinzhuang was in a worry-free situation for the time being, so she took a few more glances at the sword box that Zhou Xian was carrying. On the teacher's inheritance in a wild world, the only person who could compete with Tuyue Mountain was actually Wen Haizhou's line. I saw Zhou Xian scratching the sword body again and again, constantly peeling off layers of ancient sword intent, to contend with the thunderous atmosphere of A Liang's sword. The same as the Ascension Realm sword repair, and the gap is huge. Not only is the current realm of Zhou Xian not completely stabilized, but also the level of kendo. Zhou Xian had to admit that if he wanted to approach the current height of A Liang's kendo, there was only one possibility. The opponent had a short life and he had a long life, and then a little bit of water-milling kung fu and follow-up opportunities would have hope. The sword box carried by Zhou Xian is painted with a picture of 3 mountains, 4 seas, 5 sacred mountains and 10 blasphemy, which is very different from the true form of Daoist talisman which is widely spread in later generations. Because of the previous involvement of A Liang's sword intent, the sword box blindness has faded, revealing the long-lost true form of the 3 mountains with unobstructed views. They are like gods sitting on corpses, mountains and wild monkeys walking, and clouds hidden by dragons flying. The responsibility of the 3 mountains is to hold the yin and yang for good fortune, the belonging of the 5 elements, determine the period of life and death, the length of the matter, the main astrological division, and the destiny of the fish and dragons of water descendants. The sword box itself is a great treasure array of great immortal ranks. It is rumored that the ancient spirits are true to human beings. Holding this picture, crossing 3 mountains and 5 sacred mountains, reading through the rivers and seas, the spirits of 100 gods are respected and welcomed. It is an ancient formation, but unfortunately the craftsman who cast this object is unknown, but he is used to be called Mr. Sanshan Jiuho by the mountain monks, and then carefully refined by his teacher Zhou into a raised sword named Sword Tomb. The place, known as the master of sword cultivation in the world, can cultivate up to 9 long swords, and can nurture a certain kind of magical power similar to the natal flying sword. Once the trainer obtains this treasure, it is not a sword repair that is better than a sword repair. Inheritance from the mountain is so important, and the immortal species also pays attention to an apprenticeship such as reincarnation. As for the ancestor Zhu Fei, who was the ancestor of the world-moving mountains, stepped on the long sword Dingshan, and the avenue became a small mountain world. Zhu Fei held a long stick and showed his true body. The long stick expanded at the same time and one stick smashed it down, hitting the head of the fire dragon and smashed it. The flames were everywhere, the mountains and rivers were thousands of miles away, and the fire was torrential. I never thought that the fire dragon with its broken head would evolve into thousands of slender fire dragons on its own, winding like a mountain, resembling the dragon veins of the earth, in order to provoke Zhu Wei, the ancestor who moved mountains, who liked to move mountains. Then just move. Zhu Wei turned into a double-handed stick, a huge body spinning non-stop, and laughed loudly. A Liang of the dog, although you and I are in the opposing camp, but you are a man, I look back in my wild mountains and rivers for you. Set up a monument. Grandpa, I will personally write an epitaph for you. How about keeping the grave piled up like a mountain every year? With the long stick again and again, Zhu Wei displayed the natal magic power of the mountain-moving genus. It is the masterpiece that draws the river into the land. On the devastated and full of swordsmanship on the earth, he pushes away the awe-inspiring swords that are like giant lakes. It means that this unreasonable method of dividing water is far better than the method of water and soil on the mountains of the future generations. It can separate the rivers and seas at will, and the water will come out, divide the mountains and rivers, and leak out of the land. It is simply a kind of vulgar changes in the vicissitudes of life. Zhu Wei crashed to the ground again, stepping on the exposed roots of the earth. His body suddenly soared by 50%, swept with a stick, and angrily said, "Don't get out of here," obediently kowtow to Grandpa. The new makeup who watched the battle from a distance frowned slightly, really disliked Zhu Wei's fighting style, yelling and screaming really noisy. But Xinzhuang knows his roots and knows all these things. Don't look at Zhu Wei, the old ancestor who moved the mountain every time on the battlefield. He likes to swear words and speak inconspicuous rhetoric, knocking on the mountain all the way in the vast world. Sui Yu's methods were tyrannical and rampant. In fact, every time Zhu Wei encountered a strong opponent, he would have a sense of measure. The methods were insidious, and they were the same as Sikhen. If Zhu Wei were to be regarded as a monster with only brute force, he would end up miserably. The golden-armored knight beside Xinzhuang has taken out a meteor hammer from his waist, twisted his wrist, and the golden light circulates and spins rapidly, condensing into a flawless golden circle, and finally is swiftly thrown at the one that seems to be trying to break the ground. Comet falling from the sky. His two-pocket meteor hammers were originally designed to intercept two unusual meteors from the sky, and then spent countless treasures of heaven, material, and earth and carefully refined them. For thousands of years, most of the sages of the Confucian temple have been worshipped. Following the ritual saints stationed in the sky, often fighting against the gods, coupled with the early years of the ritual saints, the ancestors of the philosophers of the 100 families, and the dragon and tiger mountain celestial masters and other mountain monks' joint travels, the sacred battles in the sky never stopped. During this period it has created a lot of human visions. For example, it once caused the wild world to appear in two taboo places, one in the towering northwest and the southeast boundary, which seems to be collapsed. The former often rains and falls. Falling to the earth, the latter rains torrentially all year round, continuous heavy rain pouring down the earth almost all year round without seeing the sun. It was in one of the places that the old throne great demon Fei Fei found Yu Si, who later became the sword repairman of the Jiaoshan tent. Before Aoyang took the shot, Xiao Deng had already reminded Zhang Lu, when the fight really starts later, Aoyang will not stop you, otherwise he is looking for death, so be careful and give people a toast. Better than being offered wine. In his early years as a hidden official at the Great Wall of Jianqi, Xiao Sun was notoriously heartless. She made friends and asked for it. Whoever thinks Haoran is not pleasing to the eye, Xiao Sun will fall in love with. In this matter, Aoyang is another exception. Probably because this Confucian son, who is a descendant of the sage of the Confucian temple, is really not like a scholar. Coupled with Liang's sword repair status and his ability to stay in the Great Wall of Jianqi without moving for 100 years, Xiao Deng actually has a very good relationship with him. Back in those days, there would be a sloppy guy on the front side of the city during the heavy snow season, holding the little girl's 2 croissant braids in both hands, and he called it writing with a pen. Maybe this is just like what Aoyang himself said. Every sad story at the end has a warm beginning. Every year the snow and winter come from the warm spring flowers. Zhang Lu got up and smiled. I'm not a kid anymore, I know the severity. Today's battlefield is only sword repair, not friends. This great sword fairy who once became a gatekeeper at the Great Wall of Jianqi possesses 2 natal flying swords. One is Reflection, and the other is Fong Li. Xiao Xing stood up, made a jump, did not display the golden body technique, and faced the sword intent with her true body. She jumped into the green river where the kendo was manifested, stretched her 2 slender arms and punched wantonly, crushed Jenny. In addition to the fight with the left and right from the Howren world to the sky. During his years as a hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Xiao Deng not only never sacrificed his life-flying sword, nor even a long sword to take advantage of him. Every time he rushed to the battlefield he didn't even bother to use the standard sword of the sword workshop. Not today. Because left and right will definitely come to the battlefield. The old ancestor was just ascending, indicating that Firen was not in a hurry. The old monk held the crutches and jabbed the ground several times. Each time the crutches squatted on the ground, it was an exercise of supreme magical powers. The Great Road was good fortune, free of charge, pot of heaven, gas, nightmare prayer. Lu Bai sighed quietly, trapped in such an encirclement that can completely kill 14-level cultivators. Even if you are Aoliang, can you really support it to the left and right? In the next moment, Aoliang, who had disappeared, finally appeared on the battlefield. Instead of looking for new makeup, Jian Guang went straight to the back of Zhu Wei's head. Your grandma, you like to spray manure with your mouth, right? Today I have to teach you how to brag about drafts. Before Zhu Wei could withdraw his true body, he offered a secret method to replace the true body with the image. Even if he stepped on the roots of the mountain, he still did not dare to show his true body anymore, and instantly retracted to the ground. I saw that Zhu Wei's Fashang head was chopped off by a sword on the spot, and when it bounced a little bit, it was cut to pieces by the next sword light. Zinshuang's eyes widened and Shouchen said solemnly, I'm looking for you. Sure enough, a sword light is not a straight line, but a curve that just fits the yin and yang fish formation, breaking the formation with one sword. A Liang stepped out with his sword and broke into the clouded world, with a sword intent like an iron cavalry chiseling formation, ignoring the new makeup's second formation restriction. Fortunately, Xinzhuang didn't support it, so he immediately chose to run the big formation and the yin and yang were reversed. They exchanged positions with Shouchen. The sword box behind Shouchen fell off by itself and turned into an ancient formation. This ascending realm sword repairman appeared with a three-headed six-armed golden body, each holding a sword. A Liang who only had two swords in his hands had no sword skills at all, just hacking. Compared with Xiaochen's image, A Liang's mustard figure is completely negligible, handing the sword again and again. The sword light draws arcs, dazzled, crisscrossed, and the Xiaochen's law is cut back again and again after leading the sword. The last time he took the sword, his figure disappeared and he went straight to the new makeup. As soon as the new makeup started the formation again, Shouchen sighed and it was too late to remind. A Liang returned to the spot and the sword fell straight. The makeup was shocked and she had no power to fight back. She had to put a robe on her body to help her die. The robe was suddenly as big as a sea of clouds, and eventually it was broken like flowers, but no new makeup was seen. A Liang had no expression on his face, twisted his wrist, holding a long sword that was about to break upside down, and the tip of the sword casually poked into the void of the earth. The long sword disappeared like an immortal. In the next moment, the long sword pierced through the newly make-up vest and tilted its body. At the same time, a long sword just shattered, and the newly make-up body looked like a flying flight. Sword rainstorm. Fighting with Jianxiu, that's it, never procrastinating, often in a blink of an eye. The winning streak is divided into life and death. Aoliang had had countless dealings with the great monk on the top of the mountain, and saw a lot of messy magical powers. After Yijian injured the root of Xinzhuang Avenue almost at the same time, he shattered the second long sword in his hand. There were countless broken swords. Sword energy is soaring. Gathering on the new makeup side is equivalent to temporarily setting up a sword formation, trapping the world around the new makeup. Who of you has the ability to reverse the long river of time? Casual anyway, you can't let the new makeup go back along the river. Fortunately, the ancestor of the rising star held his palm against the crutches and said silently in his heart, I don't know how to sacrifice. He actually protected Zinshuang's life and allowed Xinzhuang to temporarily maintain the realm of immortals while dispelling Aliang's sword energy. The remnant smoothly patched up the yin and yang fish array that could not be gathered. Liang had already anticipated this and had long been accustomed to it. One person surrounded a group of people and it was nothing to lose. Holding the hilts of the two sabers at his waist with both hands, Aoliang once again disappeared from the place. Lu Bai was shocked to see this is Aoliang who really let go of his hands and feet and fight with others. A sky curtain in the wild world, the vortex turned over, the wind was surging, and finally a breath of suffocating avenue appeared, slowly landing on the world. There is no trace of the flying sword, but it is an undoubted natal flying sword. In the north of the wild world, there is still a sword of light going south at an incredible speed. A liang left and right, vertical and horizontal, kendo swordsmanship slashing the wilds. At the fire temple in the capital, the old master Yu Hong stopped looking at the young woman. The old man swallowed a mouthful of blood and finally settled down. He strode out of the snail's dojo. His original small figure grew bigger and he was in the eyes of everyone. After returning to his normal height, the old man finally stood still, held his fists in salute and immediately won numerous cheers. The first-class consecration of this great criminal department. Even if he does not rely on the pinnacle of martial arts who has moved the capital, he can only rely on this consecration status to walk across the continent. After this battle, Yu Hong's prestige in the mountains and rivers and lakes has improved even further. Among the crowd, some people clasped their fists silently, or quietly gave Yu Hong a gift. They were all survivors of the old Zhou dynasty. Later they were appointed as officials in the Dali court or sought a living in the capital, and they were in a similar situation to that of Zhongyue Mountain. They came here today. Naturally they have more complicated thoughts than the average spectator. As the strongest existence in Central Aquarius, the Zhou dynasty is no different from the many bigly Vas whose territory is like a tofu block, so Zhou the Duga family is destined to be hopeless. As for whether this action will be a taboo, these people are quite indifferent. The Song court of Dali still has such a belly, and the support for this tolerance is, in the final analysis, national strength. Back then, the Dali cavalry went all the way from north to south, like a broken bamboo, and horseshoes resounded through the coast of the South China Sea. The mountains and rivers of all countries became hometowns. It was chilling and terrifying. In the end, the Dali dynasty protected a continent of mountains and rivers from falling apart. Won a respect. Zhou Haijing, who is also a martial artist at the top of the mountain, does not have this kind of official body for the time being. She had previously joked with Qingzhu Jianxian and asked Su Lang to help introduce one or two from the two sides of the ritual and punishment department, and match up with that Dong Hu and Zhao Yu. The two important central officials said a few good things. However, Su Lang knew well that this was just Zhou Haijing's usual speech style. It's not true. After this questioning, Zhou Haijing only lost slightly. So a first-class worship status must be something in her pocket. Maybe without waiting for Zhou Haijing to return to the collapsed area of the capital, the Department of Military Election of the Ministry of War or the Memorial of the Ministry of Rights to pay homage to the officials of the Qing dynasty, officials will take the initiative to find Zhou Haijing. When I think of the place Zhou Haijing chose, it's said that I'm in the capital and am going all the way to pick the treasures of feng shui. Su Lang feels helpless about it. It's too shabby. Su Lang can't imagine that there are so many places in Dali capital. Chicken shit, dog shit, and even the pigsty on the side of the road. Before I went to Zhou Haijing, Su Lang had even walked through the door of a dark prostitute kiln for the first time in his life. Anyway, it was a narrow alley with dark light on both sides, so I couldn't hide. When he found Zhou Haijing at that time, she burst into laughter. The first sentence was to compensate Qingzhu Jianxian for a pair of boots. Su Lang asked softly, "Miss Zhou, are you okay?" "Not so good, old piff is thief." Zhou Haijing stretched his hand around to the back of the waistcoat, rubbed the area where Yu Hong was hit by an elbow, complaining, "I don't know the least bit of Lian Xianxia. Asking for a boxing, her face has exquisite makeup and she has become a big face. As for the hair accessories that have been piled up in the mountains earlier, they have been beaten to the Yu Hong Quan gang. It is a pity that they are all money. If you can keep it, the next few items can make a small profit." She angrily said, "Next time I ask you to find a place back, there are not so many people watching the game. Watching my old lady, I will go straight to Xiasan Road and then I will ask you to eat egg fried rice." Su Lang was speechless. This female great master, who was a similar age but was above a realm, hadn't seen him for many years, and his words remained humorous. Zhou Haijing got into the carriage, took out a napkin, vomited a big mouthful of blood and put it in her sleeve. He didn't care about the injury at all. She dipped her finger in saliva and twisted a few bills, all of which she had previously gambled in Beijing. Shuang's bet. On the roof, Qin Pingon asked, "I'm going to meet an old friend, do you want to join me?" Ning Yao glanced at the carriage in the street in the distance. "That coachman?" Qin Pingon nodded and explained. "His name is Su Lang, who has the nickname of Green Bamboo Sword Fairy. The people from the rivers and lakes of Songxi State are half of the neighbors of Senior Song. Now that Su Lang has an official status, he has also entered the far-traveling realm. Even if he can't make it to the mountain realm in the end, as long as Su Lang does not suffer a catastrophe, he still has a lifespan of at least 100 years, so I will definitely follow that one in the future. The mountain shrine. I have been dealing with Song Fengshan and Lu Qian for a long time. At that time Su Lang had just broken through the border and became a martial artist in the 7 realms. It was at the time when Song Yu burned the golden basin to wash his hands and withdrew from the rivers and lakes. As a junior, Su Lang had actually won his fame and was still aggressive. Qin Pingon gave Su Lang a punch. He fought back to the small town, but later he cooperated with Su Lang, who took the initiative to come to the door and acted in a play. He gave the other party a step down and gave Su Lang Luo a big copy of The Reputation of Swordsmanship Below the Mountain Is Not Lost to the Sword Fairy on the Mountain. The older generation's social rules and human relations are mostly like this. In the same arena, as long as there is no feud, I will say a few more sweet words on the wine table. In the narrow part of the same road, leave a step and pedestrians to walk the single plank bridge into a Yangguan avenue. Ning Yao looked at Qin Ping and Qin Pingon immediately understood, shook his head and smiled. I don't have so many weird things, I just go to Su Lang to talk about the past. It's like walking in the rivers and lakes, not showing yellow and white when going out. Under normal circumstances, Qin Pingon would not easily open the basket and reveal that family property. In a more popular way it means beating people but not face. Ning Yao said, then I won't go. Qin Pingon smiled and said, then I will go back on the way and buy some food for the capital master. Ning Yao nodded and disappeared in a flash, silently. She actually knew that Qin Pingon was still concerned about the war, and she wanted to find something to do. Distraction was a relief. So let him go alone to meet the so-called Jianghu friends. Amidst the gazes of the various government officials, the people left the scene in an orderly manner. In a secluded alley the carriage slowly stopped. Su Lang frowned slightly and there was a monk in front of him blocking the way. Young Taoists, young monks, they are all raw faces. The young Taoist priest from his registration number took out a piece of Dao's Hinjiwen genealogy symbolizing his identity. The Taoist Academy in the capital, Guling, has something to discuss with Miss Zhou. I implore Miss Zhou to get off the carriage first, and then follow the poor road to Taoism. The little monk folded his hands together. The little monk is a little novice monk from the Translation Bureau. Su Lang narrowed his eyes. A Taoist official under the Chongshu Bureau of Dai? Under the Jingqing Road, there are 6 divisions of genealogy, litigation, Qingxi, palm seal, geography and Qingge. This young Taoist who calls himself Guling is in charge of the first division of genealogy. Daoist boss is Daojing of the capital, in charge of the issuance, promotion and relegation of the Taoist priests in the capital, but he can't control himself as a pure martial artist. If Daojing comes in person, Su Lang might be willing to be polite, even though the official rank is not high. In the end it still holds real power. As for the Taoist record of a chief official, the Jima official does not say that it is different from the Yamen of the penal department. It is really a second-class worship status issued by the penal department. It is a false title. Su Lang donated a green bamboo to his waist, and hung an accident card with colored thread. Second class, not low. Pure Takeo. Only at the top of the mountain can you have the opportunity to wear the first-class accidental card. The second-class enshrines of Dai are mostly Jindan Jianxiu, Wufu in the far-wandering realm and Yuan Ing Qishir. Unless the military skill is extremely great, the Golden Core Realm Qi practitioner who is not a sword repairer can only be classified as the third class. Su Lang said indifferently, if you have something to say, let it go if there is nothing. Guling smiled and said, it's the green bamboo sword Immortal of Songxi country. Poor Dao has long admired his name, but today I have something to discuss with Miss Zhou. It is not suitable for outsiders to listen. Su Zhenxian, forgive me. The little monk asked softly, sword fairy? Now when the little monk heard of a sword fairy, he had a bald head and 2 big ones. In just a few days I have donated sesame oil money to the Buddha twice. This time Zhou Haijing was invited to discuss matters because of Song Zu's intention. After Wenquan was over she would be formally invited to enter the earthly branch. In fact Yuan Huajing visited her once before, but the 2 sides didn't talk about it. Yuan Huajing didn't reveal his identity. Furthermore, the meaning of the Ministry of Rights and the Criminal Ministry also needed the help of Yu Hong to try Zhou Haijing's martial arts. Fill a vacancy. As for this suave chariot-driving martial artist, the little monk really didn't know him, only the innocent card. Earthly branch monks, 11 chi practitioners, everyone is the proud son of the heavens born in Aquarius Island, taking advantage of the trend. Most of the monks are not natives of Dali. The Dali court has high hopes for them, tilting countless financial and material resources towards them, and also spent a lot of incense on the mountain. The biggest reliance is that in addition to their respective monk realm and talented magical powers, there is also a continent of air transport. The only flaw is the fight against each other, which is too dependent on the integrity of the number of people. This time I met with Zhou Xian. Not only the little monk was anxious, but also the female ghosts who changed their beauty and worked hard. They were all worried. In the end, Yu helped to express the voice of everyone, can make up for the last person. The strength skyrocketing is true, but the old saying is good, but there are only 3 things, let's not go to the trouble of the hermit lord? Song Su joked at the time, Yuan Huajing and I definitely don't have this idea anymore. If you are unhappy and unwilling, you must fight again. I can bite the bullet and convince Yuan Huajing. At this moment Su Lang looked unhappy and said, I don't care what you Chongshu Bureau Translation Bureau, give me way. Relying on a bit of official status, dare to pretend to be a ghost on your side? Guling was a little embarrassed. In fact, the most suitable person to invite Zhou Haijing here was Song Su. After all, he had the status of the second prince or Yuan Huajing, the highest realm, but the latter began to retreat. Zhou Haijing heard the movement outside and turned a mouthful of pure innocence, which made her face pale a little. Then she opened the corner of the curtain and smiled charmingly. Are you colleagues of Yuan Zhenxian? What's the matter? All like sneaky, isn't your identity so shameless? Isn't it the Secret Service of the Ministry of Justice, doing some pickling work under the countertop? I know it's like an assassin on the rivers and lakes who collects money to kill people and eliminate disasters. Seeing people, when I first entered the rivers and lakes I was in this business and it was so mixed up. Zhou Haijing said to herself, it's a pity that I am in the realm of martial arts, and it is difficult to get into the eyes of the masters on the mountain. I don't dare to expect the first-class offerings. But if you want to say second-class offerings, there is still a chance. Besides, I can't trust you. In case it is the habitual offender who abducts and sells the good girl, I have suffered a great loss when I look back. You all the snakes, I am a helpless woman from the country, who can I go to complain? Su Lang waited until Zhou Haijing finished speaking and would continue to drive. Since he didn't give way, he would stop if he had the ability. Anyway, experience in the arena, gods and Daoists, lack a common adversity, a rare opportunity today. What's more, in this capital city, Su Lang is really not afraid of conflicts with the chi trainers of these 3 religions. His greatest reliance is not even the nothing card of the criminal ministry, but the status of Dallas Army monk. Guling sighed. It seems that only a few more people can be called to get this girl Zhou to drive. The little novice monk said earnestly, Mr. Qin has said that everything is courteous and respectful, and you should not be arrogant. A warm voice sounded behind the little monk. No, I haven't said it. The little novice monk immediately turned sideways, folded his hands together and bowed his head and said, Mr. Qin is best at giving good words to people. I haven't said it for the time being. I will say it later. Guling turned around and struck a doorstep with the visitor with a respectful look. I have seen Mr. Qin. Qin Pingon clasped his fists in return and said with a smile, I'm here to find friends to talk about the past. You are busy doing business. Su Lang immediately stopped the carriage and dared not rush forward. Because I recognized the identity of the other party. Zhou Haijing was about to put down the curtain and stopped his movements. A pair of moist peach eyes narrowed into a line in an instant, looking at the man in blue shirt standing beside the little bald head. The little monk was too short, making the man especially slender. The double intuition of the woman and the mountaintop swordsman made her realize that this unexpected guest floating down from the height of the alley in front of her is definitely not easy to mess with. Great martial god Song Chongjing, Fengxue Temple, Great Sword, Immortal Wei and Jin Dynasty, and Wei Ying, the Supreme Lord of Zhenjingzong. All wrong. It's weird how sacred. Can you feel completely overwhelmed? Can't you do it? Qin Pingon nodded secretly. This Master Zhou was indeed a fellow, diligent and thrifty, and he was not willing to spend money on the matter. Su Lang's expression changed slightly. His mood was extremely complex. He quickly converged his mind, gathered the sound into a line and reminded Zhou Haijing, Miss Zhou, be careful of this person, he is Qin Pingon who asked Jian Zhengyangxian. Su Lang certainly did not miss the grand Jinggyang Mountain celebration. He is in the same awkward situation as Menggu Mountain, but compared to the latter the Sword Fairy is a little bit better. The storm near Jianshui Villa back then could barely be considered a good deal for both parties. After Zhou Haijing heard the name, Qin Pingon, she looked so bright she couldn't help but look at the most prestigious young sword fairy in Aquarius Island. It is very likely that he is still the youngest lord of the sect in the world. I almost heard that my ears were cocooned and I couldn't provoke it. A sword repairer who could make Yuan Jingya punch his body like a tickling, provoke him and only lose money. She immediately lowered the curtain, packed up the small and large objects in the carriage, slung a large package, bent down and walked out of the carriage. She would jump out of the carriage. Then I will go with Shinrengu. Mr. Su, please help me take care the carriage is out. The rivers and lakes are deep, drowning the daring, and the wind on the mountain is strong, blowing away the fairy tales. Guling smiled and said, "You'll just help drive the car." Su Lang hesitated and got out of the carriage. Qin Pingon turned sideways and stood at the root of the wall, giving way to the carriage. Zhou Haijing sat back in his place, then lifted the curtain on the side of the driving wall and asked with a smile, "Qin Jianxian, let me ask a bit more, make sure we have nothing to complain, right?" Qin Pingon smiled and nodded and said, "I have never veiled my face, no grievances or grudges. On the contrary, I watched the battle from afar and learned a few fist moves with Mr. Zhou, which benefited a lot." Zhou Haijing squinted and smiled, naturally charming, raised his arm and gently wiped the remaining powder on his cheeks. "It's just that my appearance is a bit ugly right now," which made Qin Jianxian laugh. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "No. Zhou Haijing is suspicious, sir? I am a woman, so it is not appropriate to call a mother-in-law like that. These monks on the mountain are really weird. It's just that I can't show my timidity. The old lady is from a small place and hasn't read a book. What's wrong with her? She looks good, just a book, and men will only rush to flip the book. It is believed that the young sword immortal is mostly from a family of great powers. Hai clan a child, it's annoying to watch." The carriage slowly drove out of the alley, and the sound of the wheels of the carriage gradually faded away. Qin Pingon turned around and smiled. "Congratulations to Su Jianxian for breaking through." Su Lang immediately clasped his fist and said, "Dolly enshrines Su Lang and is fortunate to meet Sect Master Qin again." Listening to Su Lang's self-introduction, Qin Pingon laughed dumbly, and he was not blind, so he could see such a big sign of the Ministry of Justice. Of course Su Lang was extremely nervous, but he had no affiliation with Song Yuxiao over the years, and logically speaking Qin Pingon shouldn't bother him. It's just that this kind of sword fairy who occasionally goes down the mountain to play in the world is really unpredictable and illusory. Every time he takes a shot he only depends on his mood regardless of right or wrong, and often the sword light falls straight and his head rolls. Fortunately in the misfortune, today's Aquarius Island has a lot of restraint on these lawless and arrogant monks. Moreover, after Su Lang was recruited by the Dali Department of Penalty, he did a few secret acts, targeting several groups of forbidden monks who thought they acted in secret. But what hurts the most right now, Zhou Haijing just hangs herself here, woman. Qin Pingon drew out an innocent card from his sleeve. Coincidentally, it's half a walk with Su Jianxian. Su Lang glanced at the innocence card, which was actually a third-class enshrinement innocence card. It was only slightly higher than the alternate enshrinement card. Su Lang will inevitably be a little embarrassed. Qin Pingon didn't want to take the opportunity to tease Su Lang, but just let him not think too much. Don't learn from the fairy Yun Yi in the Jiuzhen Immortal Pavilion. The two walked side by side in the alley. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "I have traveled to a foreign land for many years and I have not been in Aquarius for a long time. I just returned. How about the Jianshui Villa of Senior Song?" Su Lang carefully scratched his belly and said, "When I was goodbye, I never visited Senior Song's villa. I only heard that the Zui Villa was relinquished and moved to the border of Susui country. If you didn't participate in a few great blasphemy wars and later retreat and then came to the capital, you should actually go to congratulate Mrs. Liu's mountain shrine. I heard from friends in the rivers and lakes that Senior Song has been over the years. The body is still strong and I have traveled a few times and often go out to relax. This is a good thing. When I am free I should make up the gift when I return home next time." Qin Pingon always looked happy, just like two old friends from the rivers and lakes reunited after a long time. Only a pot of good wine for each, nodded and smiled. It should be so. Zhou Xian has the intention. Good thing. Su Lang's originally tight heartstrings slackened a bit. By the way, Xianxia Nation is close to both Susui Nation and Tsai Nation. Has Zhou Xian ever heard of the Lu family from Tsai Nation's Yanji County? Does Sect Master Chen mean the old Lu Shangshu or Lu Gaohua and Lu Gaoxin brother and sister? Lu Gaoxin was originally a disciple of the divine sect, but her luck was poor. She was extremely injured in the battle and the road was hopeless. After that she did not return to the sect but just practiced at home. Lu Gaohua is an ordinary master, but in the eyes of Su Lang he should not be underestimated because he has the status of an official who accompanied the capital. Qin Pingon said, "We are all good friends." Su Lang understood immediately. As if remembering something, Qin Pingon took out a pot of 100-flower stuffed rice and handed it to Su Lang. "Thank you, Zhou Xian. Help transfer this thing to Master Lu Xian. I won't say any kind words of thanks to Zhou Xian." Su Lang took the pot of fairy brew from the mountain that he had never seen before with both hands and said with a smile, "It's a trivial matter. It's a little effort. Sect Master Chen doesn't need to thank you." Su Lang already knew that when he returned to his hometown in the future, he would drop by to visit Song Yushao in the country of Susui and Liu's family in the country of Tsai. In the future it's also simple. If you don't need to communicate frequently, then you will fall behind. Just give a few points to both sides in secret. Qin Pingon and Su Lang walked to the side of the alley, stopped first and said, "Don't pass by." Su Lang clasped his fists to bid farewell and suddenly couldn't hold back one and asked, "Dare to ask how old Sect Master Qin is now?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Less than 100. Su Lang sighed. Sect Master Qin is really a genius of kendo. In the eyes of the younger generation he does not lose the wind and snow temple Wei de Xianxian. Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. No wonder this green bamboo sword fairy could join Zhou Haijing, one without looking at the mirror and the other without looking at the Shanshui Dibao. On the side of the carriage Zhou Haijing jokingly said, "Good day Lu, are you enshrined in the palace? Is it possible that your majesty wants to see the girl?" The little novice monk sitting on his side by Guling hung his legs in the air, and quickly sang the Buddha. The powdery aroma of a carriage oozes out from the purple bamboo curtain, making the little monk almost confused. Guling was skilled in driving a car. His father was a general of logic and he knew how to bow horses when he was young. He smiled and said, "Zong Master Zhou," said and laughed. The little novice monk was envious. Zong Master Zhou and Mr. Chen will be able to be respected by Mr. Chen if they meet together today. It really makes the little monk very envious. Zhou Haijing joked. A monk also counts such false names? The little novice monk immediately shook his head vigorously and said, "I can't be called a monk. The little monk hasn't received the ordination yet." Ning Yao returned to the inn but saw two unexpected people and smiled and asked, "Why are you here?" Pei Qian holding a hiking stick. Chao Qingqing wore a Confucian shirt. Pei Qian said with a smile, "I received Master's Feijian letter, saying that he would stay here for about half a month." The younger brother asked Chao Sunny to come here for a wedding banquet, saying that Master was not suitable for showing up, and Chao Sunny's identity is more suitable. "He'll follow to see Master and Madam here." Chao Qingqing said, "Student Chao Qingjing, I have met the teacher." He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Pei Qian finally knelt down and banged his head without a word. Straightening up, Chao Sunny explained, "Pei Qian accompanied me to Beijing on this trip. It was the younger brother in order to prevent some unnecessary accidents. Then I need to formally resign from the Hanlin Academy. Leaving Aquarius, go south to Tongyi's Hao and choose Xiazong." Originally, according to the meaning of the younger brother, it was to retain the identity of the Hanlin editor, saying that the younger brother had his own means. However, Chao Qingqing didn't agree. He just led the salary and didn't do anything and didn't go to the office. If you want to be honest, you must be sincere. As a scholar of Wensheng's line, you need to use the word "yicheng" as the criterion of action. Ning Yao nodded. "Your master wants to meet a friend from the rivers and lakes, and you won't be able to come back later." She and the old shopkeeper borrowed 2 benches. After sitting down, Ning Yao immediately asked, "Why didn't you go and see the question boxing at the Fire God Temple?" Pei Qian Yan replied, "It's important to wait for Master here." Chao Qingqing sat on the other bench and remained silent. A young girl jumping on the street came approaching the inn and immediately calmed down. The girl was not polite with Master Ning. She sat down beside Ning Yao and asked in doubt, Master Ning, didn't you go to the fire temple to watch people fight? It's really enjoyable and the fight really compares favorably to Xixiang and Cheer Street. It's much more beautiful for the children on both sides to clap bricks and scratch their faces. Ning Yao smiled and said, I went because there were too many people, plus I went too late and I didn't get a good place, so I can't really see it. The girl said guiltily, blame me and blame me. I went out early in the morning. I was worried that my dad would stop me, so I didn't call Master Ning. I have a great place with a few friends from the rivers and lakes. She sat next to Ning Yao and kept twittering. That woman Xiaozhou is so pretty. The old of fish is really well deserved. It is simply the kind of peerless expert in the book who casually gave out cheats or jazzy internal strength. Master Ning had seen it before. He flew all the way from the sky and stopped at the ring. That master demeanor simply. I really don't know how Pei Qian, who is ranked higher than them, is so bullish. She must be able to make the opponents with her eyes burst into tears on the spot, scaring internal injuries. I heard that woman Xia Pei is young. She is a martial arts wizard who has never seen her in a century. She has already been superb and righteous. Master Ning, you are also a female Xiaxia traversing the rivers and lakes. Is there such an honor to see woman Xia Pei from afar? A glance? Ning Yao held back a smile. What do you think? The girl thought for a while and comforted, it's okay, I haven't seen it either. Pei Qian sat on the other side of Ning Yao with a blank face, his brain hurting. Fortunately the master is not there. Fortunately, Xiaomi Mi Li, who works part-time in ear reporting God and Chuan microphone, didn't come to Beijing with him. Otherwise he would return to Luopa Mountain and would not be laughed at by the old chef and Qin Lingjun. Chao Qingqing always sat on another bench, clenched his fists with both hands and gently put his knees, looking ahead. A gentle smile, a modest gentleman, calm but so. Ning Yao turned his head and smiled at Pei Qian. Your master wanted to accept Ms. Lu as a disciple, but Ms. Lu didn't agree. Pei Qian leaned forward and smiled at the girl. The girl blinked and glanced at the weapon leaning on the bench beside Pei Qian, confident enough to fight. Why fight the injustice for your master? Then let us follow the rules of the rivers and lakes. Let Master Ning give up our seats, just sit here and join hands. We will agree in advance and we will stop when we click. Don't hurt anyone. Whoever leaves the bench will lose. Pei Qian smiled silently as if he only said 2 words, not dare. Do you understand me? Don't understand. The 2 sides just made eye contact and both sides could see clearly. Pei Qian was a little curious where she was so naive. After thinking about it, she quickly glanced at the girl's state of mind, froze, and Pei Qian immediately put away and looked at it. The little girl in the girl's mind is completely different from the cheerful and lively the surface. After Qin Pingon and Su Lang parted, they returned to the inn soon, and saw the disciple of the Kaishan and the proud student, which was also very surprised. Pei Qian and Chao Sunny got up at the same time. Qin Pingon walked quickly and waved at the 2 with a smile. In this scene the girl nodded secretly. Most of it was a serious sect. It was a bit regular. This foreigner named Qin Pingon seemed to be quite prestigious in her sect, but she didn't know who their head was. Is not very old, is not high in boxing skills and cannot beat the masters of the nearby martial arts centers. And look at that young man, a scholar who has caught up with the seeds of reading in Ichi Lane. She was even more certain that Master Ning's school was not a wild way. Qin Pingon sat next to Chao Qingqing and asked, Why are you here? Pei Qian pursed his mouth and dared not laugh. Master and Madam are exactly the same opening remarks. Chao Sunny explained it again to her husband. Qin Pingon thought for a while and asked, Have Cui Dongshan ever said before, why is it recommended that you keep your status as the editor and repair officer of the Hanlin Academy? Chao Sunny shook his head and said, Little brother didn't say that because he saw me insisting on resigning. He withdrew his words. Qin Pingon turned his head and said, Then don't worry about resigning, Pei Qian. Then Fei Jin will send a letter and ask Cui Dongshan for the details. Chao Sunny heard what he meant and asked softly, Mr. is the same as the younger brother, and I hope that I will keep the official status? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Nonsense, we are from the Wenxing line. Although Zhao Yao is now the highest official in the court, he is a servant of the criminal ministry, but he is not a clear one and the road is not right. He belongs to the court. You are different if you are a talented person. If you resign from office, if you resign, you will lose half of your skills. Chao Qingqing was speechless. Qin Pingon stretched out a hand and patted Chao Sunny's shoulder, saying, When I didn't come to the capital, I didn't think there was anything, but it turned out to be here, especially after visiting the government office in Nangsanfang. Finding that you didn't get the #1 pick in the exam and failed to win the world, Mr.'s still a bit disappointed. Lin Junbis boy is now the national teacher of the Shaoyuan dynasty. It's okay, my own student will soon become the youngest master of the Haoran Jiuzhou sect. It is hard to say that there is no one who has come after. It is destined to be unprecedented. Earlier, Qin Pingon and her husband had talked specifically about this matter, and they felt that it was not appropriate to make an exception, because Chao Qingqing was too early to enter the Yupu realm, so he would be given the status of acting suzerain of the Fallen Mountain sect. Chao Sunny became more and more helpless. Students can't take the exam again. Moreover, it may be good to say that they can try the ranking, but no one dares to say that they will win the championship. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I've seen that Xianxia, you two have a good vision of making friends. Chao Qingqing was a little worried but was relieved soon. The worry is that Xianxia will be involved in the officialdom of the Dali court, but if the husband does things, what to worry about, even if it is a bad thing, can turn into a good thing. Ning Yao asked heartily, still don't worry about the wild world? Qin Pingon gave a hum with his hands in his sleeves, his figure buckled, and his expression helplessly said, it's hard to rest assured. Ning Yao asked, then we take a trip to the Great Wall of Jianqi? Qin Pingon was puzzled. This side of the capital? In fact, he went to the Great Wall of Jianqi and he couldn't help much. If he really wanted to blend in, it would only help. But even if you take a closer look, whether it is the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi, or the 4 guiding ruins named Tianmu, Tatu, Xinxiang and Suncheon by the Confucian Temple, or the 3 ferry crossings of Bingzhu, Zuma, and Demai created by Haoran World, all casually. Ning Yao said, what do you want to do so much? You make an agreement with that short winter melon for a 10-year period, and the big deal is to ask Pei Qian to give the imperial palace a sentence, saying that when you are not in the capital, that 10-year time will not be counted. Even if she doesn't agree, it's up to you. Qin Pingan's eyes lit up, it's feasible. Unexpectedly, as soon as Ning Yao got up, he took his seat again. Forget it, you are too slow on your way, maybe you are still halfway and Shanshuadi will report the result. Qin Pingon was dumbfounded and rubbed his chin. Could it be that he waited for his husband to come back and asked him to ask for a holy prayer? If you ask for it yourself, it's not appropriate, you still have to let your husband go. Suddenly, 2 scholars appeared at the entrance of the inn. Both of them came from the Confucian temple across the continent. One is old and the other is middle-aged. The latter smiled and said, too slow? Not necessarily. Go ahead. Where do you want to go? Sword of Coming Chapter 844. The gentleman who returned from the Middle-earth Confucian temple really brought the saints to Aquarius. Qin Pingon and the others all got up immediately and Chao Sunny and his husband made a bow together. Pei Qian saw his wife holding a fist in a bow and he would behave like this, otherwise he would be awkward. Only the girl in the inn was a little embarrassed, so she had to follow her up, looking from left to right, and finally chose to hold a fist with Master Ning. They were all informal children. She was wondering just now, what kind of martial arts sect is this, and the words are silent. Is it the long-lost sound transmission in the rivers and lakes? The young girl wondered whether Master's gang was actually a nest of super masters. I never thought that a scholar ran out again at this moment, and she suddenly lost her mind. Whether Master Ning came from a sect of Jianghu who was hiding in the corner of the corner, it was uncertain. Ning Yao touched the girl's head and smiled. You go back to the inn first and promise not to steal your bench. The girl hummed, and it didn't make much sense to stay here. She crossed the threshold alone and leaned over the counter when she entered the inn. She whispered to her father, Father, there is a new scholar who doesn't know him. He is quite tall. Looks quite bookish. It can't be said that he is a senior scholar who is a high official. The old shopkeeper was flipping through the book while drinking at the side dish. He didn't bother to turn his head and look outside and smiled. Are there fewer scholars in Ichi Lane? Outside the inn, the saintively smiled to Chao Sunny and said, It's rare. Chao Qingqing made another move. The old scholars and the disciples of the closed door can only assume that they have not heard the implication of Li Sheng. Except for Chao Sunny, who is a rare seed for reading. Wen Sheng's line is difficult to find a scholar who is not like Wen Sheng's line. Li Sheng turned his head to look at Pei Qian and said, It's okay to take a look. Pei Qian shook his head. How dare she just look at the mood of Li Sheng? Li Sheng finally said to Ning Yao, As long as you are still the first person in Wuxia Tianxia, then there are some unwritten rules, at least in Haoran Tianxia, you must abide by it. When you return to Wuxia Xianxia, even if the sky falls, I don't care because I, like the Confucian temple, need to abide by certain rules. Ningyao, remember that any mountain powerhouse does whatever he wants, no matter whether the starting point is good or bad. There is a world in which we live. A huge impact, many invisible effects, may last for thousands of years. There is no emphasis on words, no stern words, or even the meaning of beating. The Saint of Rites just speaks a common truth in a normal tone. Ningyao was silent. The old scholar coughed slightly and Qin Pingon immediately asked, Mr. Li Xing, why don't you go to my brother's house and sit for a while? Li Xing nodded and said, okay. As the group went to that alley, Li Xing looked at the streets of Dali capital city all the way, and indeed he hadn't set foot on Aquarius Island for many years. Qin Pingon asked, Mr. Li Xing, can you not send me and Ningyao to the wild world, and only help me and Ningyao return to the Hauran world from a certain place? The same is only to let the Saint of Rites take one shot. Some place. Isn't it Tuyue Mountain? Li Xing smiled and said, relying on those 3 mountain charms crossing 2 worlds, as you can imagine, the injury has not been fully healed. If you do this, it will only worsen the situation. He intends to sleep in Tuyue Mountain for a few days first so that Ningyao discuss with the big demon guarding the gate of Tuyue Mountain. After you rest well, you and Ningyao will demolish the Patriarch's Hall? Such a good thing. I can go to Tuyue Mountain by myself. They waited 2 or 3 days and gave me half of the incense kung fu. Qin Pingon nodded and gave up the idea without hesitation. Understood. In fact, Qin Pingon had already had a rough estimate in his mind when Ningyao proposed to take a trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi before. The sequelae of the world and the underestimation of the Tuyue Mountain prohibition. Since the Saint of Rites gave this final result, Qin Pingon can go back and verify the effect of the Sanshan talisman, and even roughly calculate the road that the 2 worlds now pass. The degree of connection between the gate and the passage to the market. Li Xing walked slowly on the street and continued, don't go to the hospital in a hurry, take 10,000 steps and say even if Tuyue Shan is really broken by you, you still need to do whatever you want on the battlefield where a Liang is. Don't underestimate the mental abilities of the great demon in the wild world. I'm not denying your merits as a hidden official. It's just a matter of fact. Back then, all the affairs of the summer residence of your abbot, and the line of the hidden official issuing orders, was able to flow so unimpeded. To a large extent it was because you got the boss sword Immortal everywhere. Xylem, the boss Zhenxian, gave you the last hermit of his 10,000 years of truth. Replaced by the Xianxia Chaotang, even in the Confucian temple, no matter who supports you, you will never repeat this matter. Besides, have you ever thought that Tuyue Shan might be the person who is really waiting besides a Liang? It is also you or even Ningyao? Qin Pingon just listened carefully. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled. Although the saints of rituals are never the kind of stingy words, in fact as long as the saints of rituals are reasonable with others, there are a lot of words, but our saints generally do not speak easily. The old scholar and Ningyao said in their hearts, Ning girl, don't be angry, don't make it, the saints have always been like this and they are very rigid. In someone's words, what is freedom is that we go out on a rainy day with an umbrella in hand. The only thing that is not free is to hold the umbrella and don't get out of the umbrella. Ningyao said. Li Xing said, we will talk about the water suspension situation when we get to the house. At the entrance of the alley, the old monk Lu Jia and the young Zhao Duanming immediately appeared. Qin Pingon pointed to Pei Qian and Chao Sunny and explained, my disciples and students are not outsiders. Lu Jia moved 2 steps horizontally, stood in the middle of the alley, pointed at the middle-aged Confucian scholar, and asked Qin Pingon, wait a minute, where's this one? You kid pretend to be garlic with me and want to make a paste? There is no way to get through. Qin Pingon was a little embarrassed. It's okay for my senior to find such an unselfish janitor. Doesn't he really understand the slightest official rules and the sophistication? Take the lead and lead the way first, and the husband walks side by side with the saint of ceremony behind, and then Ningyao, Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing are behind. It's all in this posture. You Lu Jia still can't see the severity? Li Xing didn't mind and smiled and introduced himself. My name is Yu Ku and I come from the Qin Confucian temple. Lu Jia thought for a while, shook his head and said, no matter who you are, don't blame me for being unkind. If you think I'm inferior to others, I'm up to you. Anyway, I have the rules here except for Mr. Siu's article. The scholars in the veins or the people doing business in the Dali court, Don't even want to enter this alley except for the two. The Middle-earth Confucian temple is amazing. There are not many good birds. In the early years, Tui Guosher sadly returned to his hometown of Aquarius, and eventually became Dali Guosher. In the final analysis, isn't it just for your Confucian temple? Qin Pingon feels weak, but in fact he deliberately gave this old teacher Lu a chance to be close to the ritual Xingpan. Just ask a few words. Lu Jia is good and he is addicted to blocking people? The young Zhao Duanming leaned against the wall, eating peanuts to watch the fun. It turns out that his brother Qin winked vigorously at him over there, secretly pointed his finger at the man in Confucian shirt, and then pointed at Mr. Wenxing. Zhao Duanming is worthy of being a son of the Zhao family in Tianshui. He immediately recovered, his teeth trembled, and he said to his master, "Master, he seems to be the saint of rites. The saint of literary temple rites." Without the presence of Mr. Wenxing and the hint of Brother Qin, the boy would not be recognized even if he was killed. Who can believe that the saint of rites will really come to him? If I ran back to my house and vowed to say that I had seen the saint of ceremony, my grandfather wouldn't have to laugh. Hee, did the silly boy thunder again? As a child of the Shangzhou kingdom surname, especially a man, there is no lack of respect for Confucian temples. It is normal not to recognize the master of Wenxing. It is a bit far from the appearance of the real person, and the deity of Wenxing. The hanging statues have been removed for more than 100 years, but the rituals are different. They are hung in various Confucian temples year after year, and they just accompany the holy master. The old monk sullened his face, waved his big hand, moved several steps horizontally and gave way. When the group of people stepped into the alley and almost walked to the door of the house, the young man was willing to turn his head and retract his gaze, and found that his master had been facing the street and his eyes were dull, that was sweating. In the end, the master and apprentice squatted together in the alley. The old monk even made an exception and offered the young man a pot of wine, and then drank silently together. "Master, what are you doing? Don't tell me your old man is really a man. I used to think you were bragging. You were not young and handsome. There were countless female heroines and fairies who admired you, but you were hard-hearted so that the teachers of the country could take a high look. So, if you talk about those old almanacs in the future, I won't be deaf to my ears. Shut up and drink your wine. Master, I think it's going to be like the current situation. Next time the person who stops us should be the holy master, right? Go away. Master, what are you doing with me?" anxiously. Fortunately, I remind him that he is a saint. Some salted peanuts. Outside the Rinyun Iyun building, the small courtyard is quiet with ordinary bluestone slabs. On both sides of the yard, there are a few green plantains and a lonely old thin plum tree. It is straight and shapeless. The four people sat around the stone table and the youngest generations Chao Sunny and Pei Qian stood there. Chao Sunny stood behind his husband and Pei Qian stood beside his wife. Qin Pingon took out a jar of 100-flour stuffed rice and 4-flour god cups. Li Xing smiled and said, "It turned out to be 100-flour stuffed rice. I haven't drank it for many years." The old scholar stood up and said, "Peace, you just sit, I'll pour wine for the saint of ceremony." "Sir, I can do this kind of thing." "No need, you finally went back to your hometown. You still have to worry about it every day. You don't have any leisure at all. It's not for guarding the gate of Taiping Mountain. There was a conflict with people. Even the Immortals are provoked. I cleared the door with Xingyang Mountain, changed my atmosphere and visited the Confucian temple without mentioning anything else. I just had a face-to-face meeting and I entered the eyes of old Master Li. How did the old antique look higher than the top? Speaking prickly, to be honest, even I stunned him, and now you are here again in this big city to help sort out the veins, check the omissions and fill in the vacancies as much as you can, and the result is not bad if you avenge your grievances. Don't you have a moment of peace of mind, sir? I feel distressed if I don't do any trivial things for you, Mr. Will not be strong in his heart." Li Xing looked at the two quarreling two, smiled and said, "Why don't I pour the wine? As for the yin and yang weirdness and innuendo of old scholars, just get used to it." In the early days of the Confucian temple, the old scholar did not say anything less. Anyway, he was alone in the context of a context and he spits casually without any concerns about accidental injury. The old scholar sat back angrily, and the disciples who closed the door poured the wine, followed by the guest saints, his husband Ninggirl and Qin Pinyin himself. Before drinking, Li Xing said, "Wait a moment, go back twice." The old scholar hurriedly said, Why is the Saint of Rights like this? It was just between the sparks and flints. The old scholar only sighed and said nothing. Blocking a fart, just such a blink of an eye, the Saint of Rituals actually go back, has been completed and finally returned to the present. Going back in time, tracing the origin and following it, the road is hindered and long, which is called return. Along the long river of time in the same direction, swimming along the water and passing the flowing water quickly is to go. Li Xing smiled and said, "There is no danger, you are very careful." Since I was talking about the purely divine Qin Pingon, of course, it meant that Qin Pingon was in front of him, but it was actually no different. Qin Pingon stood up and thanked him. "You have worked so hard to pay tribute to Mr. Sheng." The old scholar cautiously asked, "Holy of Rights, how far have you gone?" "This is no small matter." Li Xing said, "Don't worry, it's not far." The old scholar began to show off a fame and skill that even the closed disciples hadn't learned and played a rogue. "Don't tell me these vain things, just say, how far have you gone?" Li Xing turned his head to look at Qin Pinyin, his eyes asked as if the answer was on Qin Pinyin's side. Qin Pingon couldn't pretend to be stupid, so he had to bite the bullet and give the answer in his heart. Zen has something to say, saying that it's just like nothing. Just as there is an old saying in Qin Pingan's hometown, "You can't talk to outsiders when you make a wish with a bodhisattva." The old scholar raised his wine glass with both hands with a smile on his face. "Then I will mention one first, the Saint of Ceremonies. It is meaningless to drink alone. It's better to let my brothers go one first. You are free, I can't even go three." A good meal of wine that no one would persuade to drink was to toss the old scholar with a wave of recklessness. The saint was really casual, just toasted and took a sip of wine. The old scholar craned his neck, waited. "Forget it, the saint of ceremony is not enough, so don't be polite and take a sip." The wine that the disciples finally earned after closing the door, drank it leisurely, and turned back to the few pots of 100-flower stuff that he had to give away. Qin Pingon asked a big question. "I was at the inn earlier, has he seen the saint of ceremony?" Li Xing nodded. Qin Pingon was completely speechless. How can this sort of thing count the order? According to Master Zu's explanation of words, the upper and lower sides are called the universe, and the universe has been called the universe throughout the ages. Buddhism has the saying that the 10 directions are boundless and boundless. Taoist ancestors once said that things are mixed together, born innately and cannot be described. The strong word is Tao. Lu Qin said directly that he was drowning in ants, weeds and dung. After taking a sip of wine, Li Xing said coldly, "If you want to be among the 15th realms, you need to completely transcend all the great imprisonment caused by words." The old scholar spit out a drink. Qin Pingon became more and more dumbfounded. Ning Yao thoughtfully. Chao Sunny and Pei Qian looked at each other, one with a worried face and the other with pride. The former shook his head slightly and the latter glared at him. Li Xing was about to get up and leave Beipingzu and Qin Pingon and Ning Yao to the Jianqi Great Wall site. The sequelae of the solid dissolution of the great ancestor of the wilderness was too great, and he needed him to break the cocoon little by little. The old scholar hurriedly wiped his mouth and took the other party's arm. "I just drank a glass of wine and left without giving face? Let's talk again, just a few more words, nothing will be delayed, let's talk about it, my protagonist will be passed on again. Well, how much to save me some face?" Qin Pingon immediately poured a glass of wine for Li Xing. Because there were still many doubts in his heart, he wanted to take the opportunity to ask Li Xing. Ning Yao, Pei Qian and Chao Sunny were all silent. Most people really want face, they wouldn't speak like this. Li Xing had to reseat. Qin Pingon asked heartily, "Sir, the real name and surname of the Saint of Rights, the surname you, the one who abides by it? Or is it the guest of the guest?" Regarding the name of Li Xing, there is no record in the book, and Qin Pingon has never heard of it before. Li Xing said, "It's the latter." Qin Pingon was a little embarrassed. On the side of the Saint of Rituals, those who are silent are really meaningless. Li Xing smiled and said, "Abide by the rules? Actually, it doesn't count. I am only responsible for making etiquette." Qin Pingon took a sip of wine. Similar words, probably like Aoyang said I brag. Ning Yao said that the sword needs to be practiced. The real fire dragon said that he knew something about Daoist. The eldest Xianxia said that he was in the Great Wall of Jianqi and said he didn't count anything. After pouring a glass of wine for her husband, Qin Pingon asked, "Is the tomb created by the ascending ghost in the sea the hanging mound recorded in ancient books?" Such tombs often belonged to ancient emperors alone, with numerous institutions inside, neither feathering up, nor entering the darkness of the Yellow Springs, just like a kind of alternative immortality, which is immortal and is not restricted by any road. It's just that in the Howren world there have always been written records, and there has not been a physical object for thousands of years, so that even the monks on the mountain have regarded it as a kind of strange and mysterious nonsense. Li Xing nodded and said, "It is true." Qin Pingon raised his head and glanced at the sky. That one Heist's thoroughness is just so lingering. The ascending ghost that was found by Ning Yao must be a deeply buried chess piece in the barren world. For example, when Howren was aggressively attacking the barren world, it suddenly smashed a route to the market, monks and ferry. In addition to the damage to the soldiers and horses, this is a nearly fatal blow to the hearts of the people in the world, and any gas trainer will feel anxious. On the battlefield of the wild world, the monks on the mountain and the soldiers of the various dynasties will worry about retreat, and those who have not yet rushed to the battlefield have to worry about it. Whether they can live to see the scenery of the wild world, it seems impossible to say. It's just the most terrifying thing, or the in case. Even if this result has been reached long ago, it's even more terrifying than the most terrifying. Naturally, when Hai deliberately did it, deliberately not hesitating to squander the life of an ascending realm ghost, and let Howren go into the wild, the world is safer, more stable and more at ease, and I feel that there is no more scruples and hidden worries. On Ning Yao's side, Qin Pingon has always had something to say, so this worry is straightforward and straight to Ning Yao. Ning Yao's answer couldn't be simpler. I'm only responsible for making swords on the unpleasant personnel. I can't control the rest. If you want to think about it, think about it. If you don't want to, just say hello to the Confucian temple and make them want to go. Qin Pingon agreed with a smile at the time, saying that he could think about it. No matter how much he would not think about it. Probably because only this kind of Ning Yao can make Qin Pingon talk about his thoughts and no taboos. All the thoughts in the world cannot just be kept. Otherwise everyone who thinks a lot and thinks well may be a bitter face. Qin Pingon asked, "Does the Confucian temple have similar arrangements?" Li Xing smiled and said, "Of course, it's not impolite to come and go." Finally, Qin Pingon asked a question that had been hidden in his heart for many years. In the 13th battle of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, did the Lu family of the Yinyang family of Middle-earth harbor evil intentions? The Wild World and the Great Wall of Jianqi each sent 13 people to catch each other and fight. Xiao Deng Lu Ji Ning Yao's parents Yu Qing Mi Hu Zhang Lu Yao Chong Dao Li Tumi. The lists of both sides are fixed and clear. The paper strengths of both sides are roughly the same and the key depends on the order. Regarding the ranking arrangement, it was finally proved that the sword repair that was extremely unfavorable to the Great Wall of Sword Qi was simply a trap of falling into the wild world step by step. For example, Ning Yao's parents and Zhang Lu lost to Shouchen. If it weren't for Aliang to play at the bottom, the sword would be a soaring demon, the Great Wall of Sword Qi would lose all the games. An ancestor of the Lu family used to specialize in secrets, and for this reason he lost his Dao cultivation level, and he was not even a proclaimed fairyland, but a genuine ascendant monk. Li Xing shook his head and said, "The opponent is better." The Confucian temple learned afterwards that it was the savage rising from the outside world. That is, the old man who appeared in Tuition with Shao Sun during the last discussion. The ancient gods secretly used the method of shifting stars and changing battles together to calculate the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family. If there is no accident, the first rise to do this is a careful secret instruction, and it can be counted by this. Let Howren lose an ascending realm of Yin-Yang family monk. Damage part of the top combat power of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the eyes of ordinary monks who are not on the top of the mountain, one city of sword repair can win a war. Such a wild world, even if it hits the world, what storms can be created. Since he didn't understand the strategy of the military, he would only fight brute force, and the top combat power was still so unhelpful. By the time Howren, he was just shut down and beaten up. Li Xing asked, "If it weren't for this answer, what would you do?" Chao Sunny, who had been standing, held his breath and clenched his fists. Pei Qian narrowed his eyes. "The old scholar is there instead." Qin Pingon replied truthfully, "The Lu family of the Yin and Yang family will be the next Jingyang mountain, and it may be even worse." Li Xing smiled and said, "I have seen some grievances on the mountain." The old scholar helped to add, "No, I don't care." Qin Pingon hesitated to speak but stopped. Li Xing gave an example, man and grasshopper. None of them asked anything, but one gave an inexplicable answer. Qin Pingon nodded and understood. Ning Yao was too lazy to think and finally started to toast and drink. Chao Sunny was puzzled. Pei Qian looked blank and confused. With a broken leg, the grasshopper can still jump alive. And as a person with the strength of spiritual beings, leaving aside the cultivator, he can't have this powerful vitality. As soon as Qin Pingon heard this metaphor, he immediately thought of the Xianxia fairy. In Qin Pingan's earlier imagination, a fairy that shuttles through the sea of clouds is logically interlocking and extremely sophisticated. But in fact, the construction and composition of the Xianxia fairy, except for the secret key formation center in addition to everything, is actually far more rough than Qin Ping's imagination. So in the same way, the whole world and the world need a certain degree of gap and distance. The same is true for the master of heaven and earth that my husband proposed. It is not blindly close, it is a good thing. If Li Xing had strict control over Howren's affairs, then Howren world would definitely not be what Howren world is today. As for whether it might be better or worse, no one knows the result except Li Xing himself. The final fact is that the ritual still chooses to close one eye to many things. Like, is it intentional to raise all kinds of people with the same rice? Is it tolerant of certain errors, or does it feel that making a mistake itself is a kind of human nature, and is keeping a distance from the divine, and that is why people are humans? Cui Dongshan once put forward an extremely weird argument. Someone becomes a Confucian saint with full merit, or becomes a Buddha, or becomes a real person of Bai Yujing. It is actually a good thing, so if one day everyone is really good, is he a saint without fault? Assuming everyone is a literary saint and a subsage, what's seen? Tens of millions of people are one? Is it a great blessing, or will we, ordinary masters who have not cultivated enough, feel a little bit lingering today? Qin Pingon thought more and more far, and he didn't realize it. When he picked up the wine glass and drank a sip, he recovered and immediately curbed the complicated thoughts of wandering thousands of miles. Li Xing said, "Where are you going after you think about it?" Qin Pingon said, "The Great Wall of Sword Qi." The old scholar was sneaky and started winking at the saint of ceremony. Li Xing shook his head. "Meaningless things have proved that you, a closed disciple, have no possibility of shaping the outer body of the yin and yang god." The old scholar still doesn't give up. "Try again." The saint still shook his head. The old scholar lifted his chin and squinted in the direction that imitated Bai Yujing. "I had a fight anyway, and I also quarreled the old master who disliked the Confucian temple." Li Xing ignored him and stood up. The old scholar had already come to Li Xing's side and stretched out his hands. Li Xing had no choice but to say to Qin Pingon, "This trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, your situation will be similar to that of the Confucian temple, similar to Yinshan traveling far away from the body." Qin Pingon nodded, then stretched out a hand holding the long sword Yayo in his hand. Just so, there happened to be something big or small in the capital which made Qin Pingon more careful. If he can really use the stones from other mountains to tap jade, he can verify what he thinks, and maybe he can answer the student Cui Dongshan's proposal. The final answer to the question may still be wrong, but at any rate it is an answer from the husband to the students. In the next moment, it was like only Ning Yao disappeared out of thin air, and Qin Pingon who was left behind, except for the Yayo sword in his hand. Li Xing walked to the courtyard gate, and both Lao Xiaocai and Qin Pingon followed. Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled at the two student disciples. "You can go to the library to find books, and you can take the ones you like. You are welcome." Chao Qingqing and Pei Qian entered the bookstore. Pei Qian didn't plan to borrow books, but saw that Chao Qingqing was similar to a bandit and they were no thieves. In the blink of an eye he took several copies. Pei Qian said in a bad mood, "You almost get it." Chao Sunny ignored her and soon changed from holding a pile of books in his hand to holding a pile of books. Looking at the posture, it was the kind of borrowed money. Pei Qian had nothing to do with him and felt that he was still the self he was when he was a child, and he had already kicked it. Chao Sunny said for no reason, "Do you have a booklet to record Mr. Chestnut?" Pei Qian said angrily, "How did you know?" Neither Sister Nuanshu nor Millet knew about this. She did treasure a book secretly, more hidden than all the account books, and was secretly named Chestnut Collection by her. The chestnuts that master struck each time, the time and place and the specific reasons are recorded in detail. Chao Sunny turned his head and said with a look of surprise, "Is there really any?" "No, I have to tell my husband to go." "Guess casually." Pei Qian laughed, fingers interlaced. "You guys want to sue? Then don't blame me for not reciting fellowship." Chao Yingqing smiled and said, "Just kidding." By the way, do you know that, in fact, your husband is very worried about you now, too much like him? Pei Qian was stunned for a moment and frowned. I learned from master to walk the rivers and lakes, but I don't always learn like it. Besides, if I learn like this one day it will be my own way. After a moment of silence, Pei Qian seemed to mutter to himself, Master, don't worry about this. Chao Sunny asked, say these words to master by yourself. Pei Qian sat on the threshold with his back facing so many books and said, I dare not. Chao Qingqing faced the bookshelf and turned his back to the door and said to himself, if you dare not say anything, master will always worry about you. Only if you say it, master will be true. Don't worry because you will feel that you have really grown up. Pei Qian did not speak for a long time. Chao Sunny had been looking for and picking up books and then said, then I will tell you something in my heart. I will never forgive the money when I was a kid. I may never forgive it in the future. On the Great Wall of Qi I wanted to make my husband and younger brother relieved, so I lied. But the current master sister, I think it's good. Turning his back to Chao Sunny's Pei Qian, his eyes became red. Because she actually knew that Chao Sunny didn't lie at all that time. The one who really lied was today. Pei Qian sat on the threshold, bowed his head and hugged his knees. Chao Qingqing turned his head and asked, Pei Qian, I have taken too many books, lend me a square inch? Pei Qian said dully, get out. Chao Sunny smiled and said, it's the interest. Seeing that Pei Qian never reacted, Chao Sunny had to give up. Near the gate of the house, Qin Pingon suddenly stopped and turned to look at Rinyun Iyun Tower. Back then, when I walked out of the rain alley with Chao Sunny under the umbrella, there was a black charcoal girl who stood alone at the door for a long time. Li Xing and Lao Xiao continued to move forward and stopped until they reached the door. Qin Pingan took a deep breath, turned his head and walked quickly towards the door. The Confucian Temple, or the Saint of Rites, was in fact the same predicament as his brother Cui Yong. When Cui Yong visited Luopa Mountain, he had an open and honest dialogue with Qin Pingan. Did anyone believe me? Even if some people believe it, will something good happen? Maybe they knew the truth early, but more people chose to take the initiative to open the door to welcome guests. The advancement of the wild world became smoother, completely smashing Friazhou and Tonggishao, and taking Beipingzhou at the fastest speed. After that, many forces from Jinjiazhou, Luxiazhou, Aizhao, and the three continents fell directly without fighting. In the end, only Beiju Luzhou and South Pasuzhou will accompany the Zhong to Shenzhou negative corner to resist, and then fall one after another. In Qin Pingan's view, the three people who have worked hardest in the world for thousands of years are the saints of rituals who are in harmony with the awe-inspiring world, the elder sword Immortal of the Great Wall of Jianqi and the old man in the backyard of the medicine shop. The three of them seem to be in prison for 10,000 years. In Qin Pingan's eyes, Grandpa Yang, regardless of whether he has long-term calculations, even if he knows the identity of the old man later, in his eyes, Grandpa Yang has always been a human, not a young boy Tianjun who is in charge of an ascending platform. Li Xing said, talk to Ning Yao, she still needs to go to the Confucian Temple. Qin Pingan agreed. It is not the Li Xing and the Confucian Temple who are putting on airs, but the Confucian Temple's recognition of Ning Yao's identity. Qin Pingan made an effort and did not get up for a long time. The old Xiuzai patted the closed disciple's arm lightly and Qin Pingan got up. Looking at the young man's clear eyes, Li Xing smiled and said, it's nothing. Many good reasons are empty because the reasoning person has never felt the same way and the reasoning person is not in sorrow and joy and cannot really compare the heart. Just like in the early years in the Rouge County of Tsai country, when the little girl Zhao Wan suffered a catastrophe, she was only naturally close to Qin Pingan, a stranger. Because of the same suffering. The beauty of people is in the eyes. Being silent for a moment is better than 1,000 words. Qin Pingan had only been in the Great Wall of Sword Qi for so many years and he was almost crazy, so he knew more about the efforts of the boss and the saint. The same reason, so the Saint of Rites will answer nothing. Before Li Xing left, he smiled and said, just talk about preaching and teaching karma to solve puzzles. It's the same as your husband, very good. The old scholar stomped his feet and complained, sage of etiquette, this kind of sincere language, is not better to keep it when discussing matters in the Confucian Temple? Li Xing glanced diagonally at the old scholar. The old scholar immediately turned to the wind and greeted the rudder and smiled heartily. Now that is also very good, you don't need too many ears to listen to good things. After crossing the threshold, Li Xing returned to Middle-earth in an instant. The old scholar took Qin Pingan into the alley, Treasure girl Ning, except you, no one can make her feel so sullen. Qin Pingon was at a loss, wondering why his husband would say so. It is rare for an old scholar to be on the side of this closed disciple. Wanting to get angry, he raised his hand subconsciously and immediately withdrew his hand. He almost regarded it as a silly and big one. In the end he just smiled and said, "Smelly boy, this time it is not a pretense. Stupid, really stupid. Don't pretend to be stupid when you should be stupid, and don't open your mind when you shouldn't be stupid. You didn't find out, girl Ning's this awe-inspiring trip. She is on your side. Is she always active? Provoking the conversation just to make you say a few more words?" Qin Pingon scratched his head as if that was the case. The old scholar caressed his beard and smiled. The man and woman love each other. As a husband, he still has some knowledge to teach his disciples. Qin Pingon said, "Sir, the order should not be chaotic. No matter how good the knowledge is, there is no foundation in front. They are all sky-atic." The old scholar thought for a while, helpless and relieved, and nodded and said, "Yes too." Suddenly the old Xianxia said, "I miss my brother Bai Yi a little bit. I listened to the meaning of Li Sheng. He already has the first natal flying sword, but I don't know the dozens of names I helped pick earlier, which one has it." Qin Pingon said in shock, "Mr. Bai is already a sword repairman?" The old scholar nodded, "No." The old scholar touched his head, "What a perfect match." Qin Pingon was puzzled. "Sir, what's the point?" The old Xianxia said, "Didn't Bai Yi become a child? He has to find himself wearing a tiger head hat, sir. I can't stop how I persuade him." Qin Pingon thought for a while, then echoed, "That's about the same as I can't stop Lu Jinglong from drinking." In the back alley, the two students looked at each other and smiled knowingly. The carriage stopped at the gate of a Taoist temple, and the little novice said, "Miss Zhou, we are here." Zhou Haijing stepped down the carriage and looked at the door face, which was small enough to look like the woman with the gauzy face, and said, "Good day, Lu. Is it possible that your Daojing master is practicing the law of longevity in such a small Taoist temple? After getting started, it is a fairy family mansion with a cave in a strange land. Giant, a lot of fairy birds and beasts." Guling explained with a smile. "It's not as mysterious as Miss Zhou said, and it's not too big inside. It's just an ordinary 4-entry courtyard. The Taoist priests who live here all the year round, the 6 divisions of the Taoist Academy, and the 3 or 4 people in each division. There are only 20 Taoist priests, and half of them cannot live in a private room." Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "The sparrow is small and has all 5 internal organs." Zhou Haijing turned her head and asked the little bald head, "You are a little monk who comes to Taoism, don't you make a taboo?" The little novice monk folded his hands and shook his head and said, "The world in the 10 directions is pure land." Zhou Haijing thought this little bald-headed speech was quite interesting. "When I was dangling on the rivers and lakes, I saw some monks who are known as Buddhist dragon elephants. They had the courage to call the Buddha and scold the ancestor. Do you dare?" The little novice monk shook his head like a rattle. "Don't dare not. The little novice monk now knows the 7 orifices of the Dharma. How can he be disrespectful to the Buddha?" Zhou Haijing asked casually, "The monk I saw, isn't it that, slander Buddha?" The young novice monk patiently explained, "The level of the Dharma, regardless of whether the fighting skills are good or bad, has nothing to do with whether they are practitioners. Those who have attained the Tao, claiming to be the Super Buddha and the ancestor, have great Zen opportunities. It's not nonsense. It's just that they can say that, but the little novices can't learn this way now, or they will be like falling into a devil's cave. Alas, it's better to chat with Mr. Qin, save worry and effort." Listening to the endless talk of the little monk, Zhou Haijing regretted mentioning it. Fortunately, the Taoist temple is so big, and Guling has taken them to a side house, which is where his Daelu master's genealogy office is located. A chair and a bench for guests. Guling moved the chair. The little novice monk sat on the bench, and Guling poured 2 bowls of water for Zhou Haijing and the little novice monk. Zhou Haijing waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm afraid you secretly took off the Mongolian sweat medicine and went out, especially for women. Be careful." Guling had to leave the bowl of water for himself, and never thought Zhou Haijing stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Good day, can't make a joke too much." The little novice monk didn't rush to drink water, looked down at the water in the bowl and looked carefully. A pot of water in Buddha's view contains 48,000 insects. Zhou Haijing saw the scene of the little bald head out of the corner of her eyes, and she was stunned. Damn, could it be possible that this decent Gudaelu could really do that kind of act? Guling really didn't know what kind of road the great master of whooping took. Song Su hurried over, and Zhou Haijing deliberately waited until the footsteps were near the door of the house before looking up. Here, the master's here. Song Su crossed the threshold and saw that there was no place to sit. He signaled that Guling and the young novice monk did not have to give up their seats, held fists with Zhou Haijing and said straightforwardly, "My name is Song Mingxiu and I came from the Song family in Xianxia County. Now a sword repairman officially invited Master Zhou to join our earthly branch." Zhou Haijing spouted water on the spot. No matter how lonely and ignorant she is, she still knows where the Longxing land of the Song family of Dali is. What's wrong? The old lattice mouth has been opened. Even if the Emperor's Majesty hasn't looked at the beauty of the people, she will look at a royal child. Are you really ready to hide in the golden house? Unknown Song Su went inside and turned to look at Guling. Guling smiled and said, "On the way here, Miss Zhou joked whether she would be chosen by Her Majesty and be selected into the palace." Song Su smiled and said, "Zong Master Zhou has thought about it too much. Don't worry about this. Your Majesty will not act like this and I have no such disrespect." Zhou Haijing said solemnly, Why don't you be disrespectful, Guzhenren? Can you give me a separate house and let me put on makeup first?" Song Su and Guling looked at each other. The little novice monk held the bowl in one hand, lowered his head to face a bowl of water and recited Amitabha. Guling explained in detail, "Song Su is our second prince of the Dai dynasty." Zhou Haijing sighed, but it was a sword repairman. Song Su did not have any extra polite greetings, and roughly explained the origins of the earthly branches and the pros and cons of becoming a member of Zhou Haijing. In fact, the so-called drawbacks are really nothing. At most, they cannot rely on their identity to kill innocent people. As long as they do not identify themselves with others, the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Justice will not even take care of any personal grievances, but the premise is that they cannot cause too much damage. The interests of the Li dynasty. Then there is the opportunity for them to fight each other. It will not be too many. It is very likely that there will be no one in the entire 100 years. But as long as it is their turn, the opponents they will target must all start in the fairyland. Song He continued to speak without taboos with great sincerity, and directly reported a series of imaginary enemies, the emperors of Weibo, Jinqing, Shenzong Qizhen, Yunlin Jiang Patriarch. Maybe after 100 years the earthly branch, the monks of the same line, will break through their own borders. The enemy they need to face at that time, Yuan Huajing, will ultimately be responsible for killing with a sword. It will be an unruly Honshu, or a foreign soaring realm passing by Aquarius Island. Great monk. Zhou Haijing didn't interrupt from beginning to end. After Song Su finished speaking, she smiled and shook her head and said, "I don't believe there is such a good thing in the world, so I refuse." Song Su poured himself a bowl of water and after drinking it in one breath, he nodded and said, "There is such a good thing." Zhou Haijing smiled and asked, "If I don't agree, will you buy and sell?" Song Su nodded and said, "Yes." Zhou Haijing rolled his eyes while one of them accidentally entered the thief's den, so the old lady couldn't get on the thief boat by mistake. Song Su said, "Since we have chosen you, you cannot refuse. The great master of martial arts, even if you look at the mountains and rivers of Aquarius Island, is still rare. On the previous list there are only a few people. Yu Hong is limited by his martial arts qualifications and is old, and he is destined to be endless. As for the embroidered mother of Beiju Luzhou, who is also a female martial artist at the top of the mountain, the Dali criminal department has actually been in contact, and the advice given is to give up. As for the more suitable Pei Qian, forget it, no one wants to deal with that hermit now." Zhou Haijing shook the water bowl. "What if I must refuse? Will I be unable to leave the capital?" Song Su nodded and said, "It's bad luck, that's it. If you are lucky you can escape from the capital by your ability, then you are not allowed to step into the territory of Dali in this life. Once you find it you will be determined." Zhou Haijing tutade, "Hey, what I said, I finally believe that you are the second prince of the Song family." Song Su smiled and said, "I just said so much." Zhou Haijing dropped the bowl of water on the table casually, stretched out his thumb, wiped his lips and slowly said, "By the way, what does it mean to damage Dallas' interests too much? Who can help explain?" Guling took the initiative to say, "For example, a person who is in the Dali martial arts or a certain upper 5-level monk in Dali, except for wild repairs. Zhou Haijing said, silent for a moment, and tentatively asked, "You can't be happy, unconstrained, lawless, kill whoever you want to kill? Don't you, Dali Frontier Army, have all the merits of battle?" Song Su shook his head and said, "No." Guling added, "If we really have feuds with these two kinds of people, we can report them in advance. As long as the two servants of the criminal and ritual department have passed, we can still take action, and we can guarantee that there will be no worries." Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "I am a girl from a fisherman village girl who only dare to walk the rivers and lakes down the mountain, but I don't have the ability to provoke the floating gods on the mountain." No one spoke up. She had to continue. "Listen to your tone. Even if it is the official lords of the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Justice, they can't call you, so you still care about the rules and what to do? Does this count as a group of dragons without a leader? In that case, you do it. Why don't you choose a leading eldest brother yourself? I think His Royal Highness the Second Prince is very good, good-looking, kind, patient and high-level, much better than Yuan Jianxian who likes to stinks." Guling said, "The National Division has made several untouchable rules which must be followed." Zhou Haijing curled his lips. "But the master of the National Normal University who created the earthly branch by himself is no longer there." Song Su shook his head and said, "The real rules are in no one's place." Zhou Haijing frowned as if she didn't think this kind of thing would be said from a big prince. Guling smiled and said, "Miss Zhou, it doesn't matter if you say this here, just don't be heard by the previous Mr. Chen." The little novice monk stretched out his hand to cover his mouth and whispered, "Maybe I have heard it." Guling nodded his head with deep approval and glanced outside. He didn't feel that his Taoist temple's mountain and water restrictions could prevent Qin Ping's flying sword from sneaking in. This hidden official Qin Jianxian did a lot of things. Savvy. In short, they have experienced it personally more than once, and the cost is more painful than ever. Song Su rubbed his eyebrows and looked at the woman who did not believe in evil. In fact, Song Su was not worried that she would refuse this matter. Instead, he began to worry about whether she would involve the other 10 after joining the earthly branch. One person. Zhou Haijing got up and said, "I rented the carriage. Can you return it for me?" Song Su smiled and nodded. "Of course it's okay." Zhou Haijing was very angry. "Do you not only know which store but also how much money I spent? You can find out exactly what it is?" Song Su said, "As long as Zhongshe Zhou agrees to be a member of our earthly branch, the criminal ministry will not investigate these privacy. This benefit will take effect immediately." Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "I will think about such a big matter. I have to think about it before I give you an answer. By the way, can you lend me a non-event card to play around? What about a liar? The only thing you can do with the nothing card is to fake it, and no one dares to fake it." Song Su drew out a prepared first-class accidental card from his sleeve, and gently threw it to Zhou Haijing. Zhou Haijing walked to the door. "Don't give it away, I can't run." It turned out that no one sent her out, making her half to death. After Zhou Haijing left the Taoist temple gate, she covered her face and immediately turned into an ordinary woman's appearance. She then wandered all the way and walked back to her residence in the capital. "It's not a lie to choose a place," as Su Lang said. "When I first arrived in the capital and went to the temple fair, although she was covered in her face, she couldn't hide her figure. Her chest was bulging. With a thin waist, which man is not greedy when he sees it?" Soon the two young thieves were caught up. They were bold enough. One of them wanted to wipe their hands and feet, and the other was even more excessive and wanted to steal money. The one who wanted to wipe the oil, seeing that her brows were pretty clean, pinched her cheek and turned it around. The pain made the teenager's face full of tears, as if half of his face was torn off by the woman. As for the who dared to steal money, he just dislocated his hands and was kicked to the ground by her, rolling on the floor with pain, only to feel that a bitter gall was about to break and she stepped on the side face. Use an embroidered shoe to run repeatedly. After that, she asked the two teenagers to lead the way, saying that she would help find a place to settle, and only one condition was that she did not need to spend money. Then he found the place where he lived right now. Apart from the fact that it didn't cost any money, the green bamboo sword Immortal knew the best way. Within the city of Dali, there are not only wealthy families like Cheer Street who are interested in Xianxia, but also the grievances of frogs at the bottom of the well, and there are also places where cockroaches, dog pirates and horses grow thin. After walking through a roadside pigsty, Zhou Haijing glanced inside. He was still a little thin. Even if he sneaked into his house in the middle of the night, It seemed that there was not a few caddies of meat to stew. What is the hardest thing to survive the new year? Is it a poor man without money? Haha, wrong, it's actually a pig. Zhou Haijing laughed to herself, funny, and she was really funny. In the future, whoever will smoke from his ancestor's grave and be lucky enough to marry himself will definitely not be bored every day, whether it's on the bed or under the bed. Walking in a dark alley, she suddenly stopped and sneered. Xianxia, as the master of a sect, is he not kind enough to act so sneakily? After a while, Zhou Haijing breathed a sigh of relief. Either he had thought about it more or he didn't swindle. In fact, along the way she was carefully investigating the surrounding air, but she never found any clues. Zhou Haijing spit on the ground. These immortal, misty and dog-like cultivators are veritable mountain gods compared to the ordinary people at the bottom of the mountain. They are powerful and extraordinary, and they do things better than the people of the rivers and lakes. If you don't talk about the rules, you can't see it, so what else can you do besides only using force to violate the prohibition? Along the way, passing by a few alleys with inferior powdery powder scent, chatting with some familiar sisters, some women persuaded her to pull her into the group, saying that it is easy to make money. Zhou Haijing answered, right? Earning money is fast. Several women laughed so beautifully together that it became harder to hide the wrinkles around their eyes. Zhou Haijing returned to his residence. It was a secluded and shabby yard with two teenagers squatting at the door. Zhou Haijing kicked one away and said with a smile, "A handsome young man like you must be careful when going out, maybe one day his will hurt." She took out the key and opened the door, too lazy to close the door, so she went to the clothes rail to collect the clothes. She stood on her toes, stopped her waist, stretched her arms, and the two teenagers sitting outside the door twisted their necks together. "Look at that graceful shrew." Zhou Hai's camera didn't turn, and he continued to collect clothes on the bamboo poles and said with a smile, "Be careful, my old lady will kill you all." Someone coughed in the alley not far from the courtyard. Zhou Haijing became furious. "A good Xianxia, you really have a face. Why don't you just sit on the bamboo pole and wait for me?" Qin Pingon walked to the door, and after stopping he clasped his fists and apologized. "It's a crime to come uninvited." "Something." Zhou Haijing threw out a piece of clothing directly. "Apologize, then die." Qin Pingon was facing a major enemy and instantly avoided sideways. "Then I will come again next time." On the head of the Jianqi Great Wall ruins, two figures appeared out of thin air just beside the cliff. Qin Pingon looked at the opposite side. Many years ago he had been standing on the opposite side of the cliff, looking at the gray robe on this side, adding a lishen at most. Withdrawing his gaze, Qin Pingon took Ning Yao to find Wei Jin and Chao Jun, swept away, and finally stood in the city head area between the two sword repairmen. Wei Jin said, "Mr. Zhou has already gone south." Qin Pingon nodded. Although he had guessed it, he was still worried when he heard the answer. Sitting on the edge of the city head looking into the distance, Ning Yao stood by. Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment, but couldn't help asking the two in his heart, "Did my brother talk to you for help?" Wei Jin said calmly, "Never." Chao Jun didn't speak with a smile on his face, but just looked at the guy whose face gradually became gloomy. Did he take the wrong medicine? Can't it, a Xinjiang mountain greeting ceremony, what a romantic sword fairy, people are more popular than others, I want to fight and kill in Aquarius Island and Tonya Island, and I have countless swords and I haven't gained much fame. Chao Jun was glanced at by Ning Yao. Chao Jun had to say, "Here, in addition to teaching swordsmanship, Mr. Zhou has always been too lazy to talk nonsense with me. Qin Pingon is so talkative, this girl is different." After talking about this, Chao Jun was not angry and said angrily, "Qin Pingon, who said that Mr. Zhou invited me to practice swords here?" Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "It's me, what's the matter?" As long as the senior brother didn't let people help, even if this trip went south, the risk was still great, but at least it was not the worst idea Qin Pingon had previously thought. Chao Jun glanced at Ning Yao and endured. Qin Pingon remained silent, just looking into the distance. Ning Yao sat aside. Chao Jun remembered something and said, "Qin Dajiangxian, there are many immortal masters who come here to play now, big and small, all of them eat and have nothing to do every day. No personal control, I guess it will happen right now." Never thought that Qin Pingon was like a deaf man. Chao Jun said nothing more. After a long time, Qin Pingon came back to his senses, turned around and asked, "What did you just say?" Chao Jun couldn't laugh or cry, lazily raised his hand to hug the back of his head and said, "It's okay. Qin Pingon did not look into the distance this time, but narrowed his eyes, looking at the vast ground beneath his feet. For thousands of years, how many swordsmen have been repaired? The hometown and foreign land are here, come like wind and rain and go like dust. Sword of Coming Chapter 845. Nowadays, the Qi trainers who are visiting the Great Wall of Jianqi are crowded and crowded, making people uncomfortable. You can see all the scenery at no cost. About Mo is attributed to the famous name Wei De Jiangxian of Fengxue Temple, but no one dared to take the initiative to approach this side. When passing by, they would intentionally or unintentionally approach the other side of the city. At this moment, some people are already guessing where the pair of Taoist couples on the mountain came from, and they have the courage to sit at the head of the city between Wei Jin and Chao Jun. In fact, Chao Jun belonged to the light of the Wei and Jin dynasties, so people would be curious about his identity. In the end, there are two ways of saying that one was originally a descendant of Chao Shi Laojian Ferry in Zhenhai Tower, Nan Pasuozhou, and the other one was originally beaten by him in his early years. The congenital sword embryo that shattered Jiangxin's heart at most asked about one more thing: did the left and right hand out one sword or two? So during the time he came to practice swordsmanship, Chao Jun was very upset, thinking that Lao Tzu was a real swordsman in the Yuan-Ying realm. Apart from this site of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, where can't you find a sword fairy in the world? Chao Jun remembered something and said to Qin Pingon, "By the way, there was a wandering Taoist who claimed to be your uncle. He chatted casually with Wei De Jiangxian and me. He was very aggressive and had a big frame. What's the background?" Chao Jun had been to Lizhu Cave, and the Chao family's ancestral home was in the Nipping Lane. He naturally knew that Qin Pingan's family had no relatives. Qin Pingan said, "Of course it's not my uncle. Maybe it's yours. Next time you meet again you will just shout like that. I promise it's nothing bad, believe it or not. It is Wu Shuangjiang who is undoubtedly, but I don't know if he has found the old deaf child. There is no 14th realm cultivator in the world that is easy to provoke. A cultivator, the higher he climbs, the more he knows this. And Qin Pingan is now a cultivator of the Jade Profound realm. If the road to practice in the next 100 years is going to be smooth, he will become an immortal and become a soaring, but that is said to be Xianxia and Xian outside asking the Xian, the 14-realm combination. There are no clues about the opportunity, which makes Qin Pingan feel very powerless, because it is absolutely certain that people like Xing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang who never hug the Buddha's feet must have been prepared for the rain as early as the 5th stage. I figured out the path of harmony and how to go. Chao Jun was puzzled. The two seem to like to talk like this. Is that Taoist really a distant relative of Qin Pingan? Chao Jun asked tentatively. Is that guy a certain ascending monk with a hidden identity? Qin Pingan shook his head. It's not Ascension Realm nor sword repair. However, the palace master of the Qingming World Expelling Palace was a 14th realm great monk, and he also imitated 4 fairy swords. Chao Jun smiled and said, "Then I still recognize a fart relative. It's not a matter of taking advantage of it. Qin Pingan doesn't matter anyway. The account of lied to you to come to the Great Wall of Jianqi will be evened. It is you, Chao Jun, who will not seize the opportunity." Chao Jun smiled and asked, "Nowadays there will be fairy sisters in the city every day. You should have seen it on the way just now, so you are not angry at all?" Fatty Powder, Ying Yen Qingling, I traveling, enjoying the scenery, leisurely enjoying the scenery everywhere, leisurely traveling, few swordsmanship and many training men. Even if Chao Jun had visited the Great Wall of Sword Qi in the future, he knew that this was incompatible with the Great Wall of Sword Qi that had once killed the world. Qin Pingan shook his head. Chao Jun looked at this guy's face, not as if pretending to be indifferent, so he became more curious and couldn't help asking, "Why? Leave me with you, keep seeing one fight one, see two fight one pair." Qin Pingan said, "This is the meaning of the Great Wall of Jianqi. With the Great Wall of Sword Qi standing here for thousands of years, there will be a great piece of life for thousands of years." Chao Jun sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. He came late, so he should come early and shouldn't miss the battle. Qin Pingan turned his head to look at Ning Yao and asked, "What did this guy say just now? I was a bit distracted, I really didn't hear it." Attempting to take advantage of the opportunity of being overwhelmed by the great Tao of Wild World, to check the battle situation in this hinterland of the world, was a pity in vain. "Just doing this, I can't get distracted," Ning Yao said. He said that someone stole the gravel from this half of the city at his feet and brought it back to Haoran. In fact, Ning Yao didn't care about such things. The Great Wall of Jianqi in her heart is Jianxiu. As for the other half, because of Qin Pingan's harmony with him, the Confucian temple did not make any special rules, and there was no explicit stipulation that no foreigner was forbidden to climb to the top of the city. But only 4 words were given: conceded. The gas trainers who have traveled far here know the seriousness of the stakes, and of course they dare not go there to get in trouble. God knows if there is any weird restriction over there. The only inside story that can be determined is the city head over there, which seems to be the place where the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi was practiced. Ning Yao frowned and asked, "Why doesn't the Temple of Confucius restrict this matter? Isn't there a saint who accompanies it?" She doesn't care. It doesn't mean that Confucian temple can act so unclearly. Since you can't figure it out, still have the face to stay here? Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "This is a kind of respect from the Confucian temple to our Jianqi Great Wall." Ning Yao wondered, "What's the solution?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Regardless of the size of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, it will be handled by the sword repairmen of the Great Wall of Sword Qi." Ning Yao nodded and said to Qin Pingan, that bit of grudge disappeared in his heart. She suddenly stretched out her hand and gently held Qin Pingan's hand. The reason why Ning Yao was at the inn and offered to accompany him here was to reassure him a little bit, not to make him more worried. Because she could feel it, Qin Pingan became even more worried after coming here. Qin Pingan laughed softly. "It's okay. I'm just used to being in a daze here. I won't be able to change it for a while. As for my worry, it's actually okay. I'm too worried and not worried. Between the two, a compromise is enough, and I will take care of my measure." Just like the bumps between the love between men and women, in fact, women's emotions that make men confused are justified in themselves. Recognize her emotions and then help to ease the emotions. When the woman is no longer angry, then come to calm her heart. Talking about yourself is the right way. This is called taking a step back and thinking and applying what you have learned in order. Once you skip the previous link, everything will stop. Ning Yao turned his head and glanced at the opposite half of the city and asked, "If you ask someone over there about the sword?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Then you can break your wrist with Wei Dejiangxian. If only the winner is divided, I will definitely lose. But if the 2 parties are agreed not to leave the city, there is no suspense. I live and die." The heart of the Fengxue Temple Great Sword Fairy with the horizontal sword on his knees moved slightly. Ning Yao and Qin Pingan had no words in the dialogue. Qin Pingan turned his head and smiled. "It's not illegal to brag, right?" Wei Jin laughed. "Anyway, whoever is the official has the final say." Qin Pingan threw a pot of Bai Huan Yang to Wei Jin. "Wei Keqing is the old customer of my wine shop. He used to be said to be the bully of Tianzhou, and I was so angry that I was in the summer palace. I can't get out of my body, otherwise I have to be one person in one sack. By the way, this is not an ordinary Baiwafudi distilled rice. The saint of ceremony has not drunk it for many years, so Wei Dejiangxian must take it easy or it will be ruined. This pot of priceless and marketless wine. Where there is a lack of alcohol in life, there is only a shortage of friends who are willing to invite people to drink. Besides, there is one thing that Qin Pingan never personally mentioned with Wei Jin. For the first time in his life, he saw the so-called fascinating style of a sword fairy. In fact, it was not Alien who accompanied him all the way, but at the mansion of the married woman ghost, the sword fairy of Fengxue Temple opened the sky with a sword. It's just that, if there is a chance in the future, I will be able to drink high on the wine table with Wei and Jin, and it will not be too late. Wei Jin caught the wine jar, uncovered the red paper with the mud seal, raised his head and took a sip. His eyes lit up and he nodded and praised. It turned out to be really good wine. Qin Pingan didn't care about what should be with Wei Jin, so he quickly reached out his arm and held the piece of red paper that was drifting away in his hand. After putting it in his sleeve, he didn't forget to add, "If you don't mind, I'm done. Wine, return the empty wine jar back to me." Wei Jin asked earnestly, "Do you have anything left? I can buy the next jar of wine." "You can bid at will. I will buy a few jars if you don't have enough money for Guyu. I can borrow it from someone." Chao Jun was very greedy, rubbing his hands and asked, "Qin Pingan, it's not appropriate for you to be so favoritism? Don't forget that we are fellow villagers and neighbors in an alley." Qin Pingan twitched his lips. "Wei Dejiangxian is my down-and-coming guest. How old are you? You really want to ask me for a drink? Would you like the glutinous rice distilled rice from my hometown? It's delicious and not expensive. Guaranteed low prices and good quality." Damn, I haven't asked you to settle the old account in Ni Ping Alley, but he has the face to mention his neighbors from the same town. This Zhou Xian is really forgetful. If it weren't for Chao Jun's visit to Tongyi's house, he used to follow his brother to guard the gate leading to the colorful world. Then in Xingyang Mountain, Qin Pingon would mistake him for the first-line peak master. One of Tang's descendants passed on to the sword fairy. Chao Jun sneered and said, "What is the guest on the mountain? They are nothing but money. Of course I am not talking about Wei De Jiangxian and Qin Pingon. I will give you Luopa Mountain as a named offering. Even if the ranking is at the bottom, for example, whoever wants to be worshipped in the future, first pass the last stage to worship Chao Jun. If this is passed, you will have a lot of face in the fallen mountain, right? I am a nascent soul realm swordsman anyway. What's more, maybe the day after tomorrow will be the Yupu state. Take a pot of wine and change it to worship. How?" Qin Pingon rubbed his chin. Luo Pashan is about to establish the next clan. It is indeed short of manpower. Chao Jun laughed and said, "The biggest advantage of my life, Chao Jun, is that I don't care about fame. It is better to worship the last seat of the next sect." Qin Pingon tossed Chao Jun a pot of 100-flower stuff. "That's okay." Ning Yao reminded, "Just your delivery method, you can't keep a few jars of stuffed flowers. You can visit Aunt Feng again and find a reason, such as welcome her to Feixingcheng as a guest." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. "This is a good starting point. It is estimated that Wutanjiu will start." Chao Jun was more sentimental than Wei Jin. He took out a wine glass, poured the wine, sniffed, toasted a sip of the wine and took a sip. He drank the wine and asked in his heart, "Wei Jin, Ning Yao has always been such a woman? It is indeed different from the legendary Ning Yao who kills monsters on the battlefield and only practices swords outside the battlefield. It is simply not as famous as meeting." Wei Jin said, "I don't know." Chao Jun continued to inquire. Wei Jin said, "I only know that instead of secretly speaking to me, you should openly ask Ning Yao." At this moment, Wei Jin suddenly remembered that the young woman Xianxia was an ascendant. It was Ning Yao who followed Qin Pingon. It was not like an ascending sword repairer. He had a reserved edge, soft eyebrows and a light weather. He looked like the first person in a colorful world. Qin Pingon looked at the ground outside the city and was carefully scrutinized by Tao Ting Taoist fellow back then, so there must be no chance of picking up the big leak. Moreover, in recent years, monks from other villages have come and gone, many of them are hermits. The vast battlefield outside the city must be eaten by plowing dogs, and it has long been digging 3 feet. Gently holding Ning Yao's hand with one hand and raising the other, Qin Pingon pointed to the distance and introduced her several ferry crossings and the gates of Guishu with his heart. The 3 ferry crossings of Bingzhu, Zoma, Damai, and the vast world opened up here. It is still expanding and moving to the south, especially the ground crossing city created by Mo Jiajuzi. It is becoming larger and towering into the clouds. It is the only sight that Qin Pingon can see relatively clearly on the city's head. The city can garrison 200,000 troops, and with the expansion of the city, it can eventually accommodate 300,000 dynasty cavalry forces and arsenal supplies. In addition, there are more than 12,000 Qi trainers who are proficient in mountain construction and organism, relying on 2 ferry crossings to build a majestic city that can be moved. In addition to the farther gates of the 4 return routes, Tianmu, Xinxiang, Tetus and Sun Pendants, there are great constructions in the surrounding areas, and the monks and mountain troops continue to rush to the wild world. Sword boats, mountain ferries and intercontinental ferries continue to pass through the return to the market channel that looks like a dart from the of water, escorting the forces of all continents in the world to travel to the wilds. In the past, only ascended realm. It is not surprising that the great monk can cross the 2 worlds. Listening carefully to Qin Pingan's words, Ning Yao suddenly asked, "Dali Confucian Temple really helped to repay the biggest foreign debt owed to the Mo family?" Qin Pingon said this debt was originally an astronomical amount of fairy money. Therefore, the frontier army dispatching of the Dai court has become more and more at ease. In addition to the big creditors like Lu Jubao and Zhong Tiyu from Ia's Hao, it is very easy for the Song family to compensate, and they have their own Tongyi's Hao mountain and mountain to do it for them. Seems like Brother Cui Yang does things and never leaves any mess. Seeing Qin Pingon start to be startled again, Ning Yao withdrew his hand. Qin Pingon returned to his senses, and continued to talk about the awe-inspiring advancement of the world. The territory of Hauranjiuzhou is headed by Mrs. Lushwiking Dandan, who nominally controls the land and water transportation of the world. Almost all Jianghe Zengshens of higher rank will shoulder the responsibilities similar to the escorts of the rivers and lakes. Under the command of the palace and government, the Narcissus officials and the spirits of water descendants opened up temporary ferry crossings in the water to connect the ferry boats from all continents. Now 3 of the Great Lakes monarchs, including Li Yeho on the Moon Lake after the Confucian Temple discussion, have been promoted to the next level and become the monarch of the sea, and they are divided into the world. In addition, the Confucian Temple also reopened Daoist canonization. After Beiju Luzhou Jidu and Beipingzi Chidu, a group of new Dadugong Hubo and Shuizheng were successively sealed off. The old Jiao in the Feng Shui cave of the Qiantang River in Beipingzu has just been promoted to be the Uncle Li who has filled the vacancy of Qi Duchen Pingon. Also heard that the Dali court seemed to have deliberately asked Yang Hua, the of water of the Tiefu River, to fill the temporarily vacant post of Changchunhao. The Haoran monks who came to this barren world one after another, stationed in Sandaku and Sigixu, can be described as taking a leisurely moment. By virtue of various magical skills, they drove a large number of talisman warriors and puppet spirits to open mountains and move rivers in the barren world. Move to the lake and build a large formation, only to say that the merchants are at the gate of the 4 major guishu, worthy of the name, throw money like rain, change the weather, add the spirit of the world, and let the air trainer rely on the mountains and rivers to make the landscape alive, gathering together, and the cultivators of the farmer and the pharmacist, planting the immortal plants and grains, calling on the wind and rain, changing the geographical advantages, the mountains and waters, turning the barbarian miasma land into a place of cultivation, or a good land suitable for cultivation. Ning Yao asked, the 3 continents of Tongye, Fuyao and Jinjiao, the barren world must have grabbed a lot of supplies. Now where is Tuyue Mountain used? Unconsciously, he shook his hand for Qin Ping and Qin Pingon shook Ning Yao's hand slightly. Her fingers were slightly cool and she squinted and said with a smile, in the previous discussion of the Confucian Temple, this matter was the top priority. In fact, many people ignored it earlier. Without definite clues, no one can give a detailed answer. After drinking a jar of 100-flour stuffed rice, he tossed the empty wine jar back to Qin Pingon. Wei Jin said, previously Qi Tingji and Lu Ji came here just for a while, and soon they each brought a group of dragon elephant sword sect. Jianzi rushed to the 2 ferry crossings Bingzhu and Zoma. After all, the Wei and Jin dynasties still bear the title of a famous guest clerk in the name of Luopa Mountain, and he has his share of the ceremony of Xingyang Mountain. Chao Jun, who was already half a monk of the Luopa Mountain, remembered something, turned the wine glass and said, although the Confucian Temple has warned that it is not allowed to leave the Qi practitioners privately, even if they have gained something outside, they will still not be counted in the battle. There are several trainers who do not follow the rules and travel across the border without authorization. Qin Pingon said, it is profitable. What is the result? After taking a sip of the wine, Chao Jun curled his lips. What else? People die for money and birds die for food. I really thought that the barren world is a place where you can travel freely, and they all died suddenly. Not only the body was gone, there was no trace left. It seems that even the monks of the Yin and Yang family couldn't deduce the reason afterwards. Chao Jun poured another glass of wine. I heard that just a few days ago, there was a fairyland Jinjiazu wild repair at the entrance of the Huaishu Passage. I can't remember the name anyway. This buddy probably feels dependent on it. The realm and the escape technique are available, so I sneaked up to a demon clan's hilltop sect and retreated if he wanted to rob his house. Guess what? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, I can't guess. Such a mellow wine without a few dishes. Chao Jun sipped a mouthful with regret. When he came back, only half his life was left. It seemed that he had consumed a half-celestial soldier's natal creature before he managed to save his soul and fell directly into Yuan Ying. This guy, in fact, I was very cautious. I first sent a puppet to explore the depths and there was nothing wrong with it. Then he showed up and then immediately ran into a group of young monks, who seemed to be waiting for him to fall. Entering the trap, he couldn't see the face and the number of the opponent clearly, just blink of an eye, that's how it ended. Qin Pingon said indifferently, similar to fishing, catching the big and letting go of the small, they are hunting the monks of the upper 5 realms who specialize in the awe-inspiring world. The merits of the battle are given away for nothing. A fairy who couldn't even remember Chao Jun's name. After Qin Pingon returned to Haoran, He had never heard of any fairy cultivators on the Xianxia battlefield. Pei Qian had not mentioned it and he had never heard of it at the Confucian temple. Qin Pingon suddenly frowned and said solemnly, "No. Wei Jin, you immediately fly a sword to send a letter to remind Master He who is sitting in the sky to be careful of this person. This fairyland wild repair, death is really dead and it is still dead. God knows who the last one returned alive is sacred, even if it's just a so-called nascent soul monk, it can still make a lot of noise." Wei Jin shook his sleeves, a sword light flicked out, and went to the sky to remind the Confucian temple to accompany the saints. "The sage who sits here is named He." Qin Pingon suddenly asked, "Which way is it?" Chao Jun said first, "Tattoo." Qin Pingon changed his mouth and said, "Then you don't need to fly the sword to spread the letter, you can take it back so we won't be self-defeating and startling the snake." Wei Jin was too lazy to ask something and directly withdrew the flying sword. At the Tianmu of Guishu, the 2 vice-chiefs of the Confucian temple and the 3 university palace worship wine, arranged together. In the village of God, there is Fulu Yuxuan who can return to the world at any time, and the great celestial master Zhao Tianlai of Longhushan is said to carry his sword and travel far away in the wilderness to find the old ancestor who moved. There is also the real fire dragon who has already made a shot in the wild world, and the ambitious Beiju greatsword Immortal by Chong. On the tattoo side, the beta Xianxia is in the middle, the big-end woman Valkyrie Pei Cup, and the great monk Huayin, one of the 10 people in Middle-earth, and Guo Uding, the ascending monk of Taishishan. Sovereign Wuxia of Tianyao Township in Fuyaozhou, Lu Shizhou female Immortal Zhou Xian. She is also the master of Song Ai Fudi in Conqian's sect. Her identity is a bit similar to Jiang Shangzhen who holds a cloud cave blessed land in Tongyi's Hao. Sunfall. There are Su Zi and Lu Qi. Dali Song Chongjing Yugui sect master Wei Ying. Chao Jun asked cautiously, "I really don't need to remind you a few words? If we don't know about it, we will be on the side of the Confucian temple afterwards and be charged with carelessness." Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "No." Chao Jun angrily said with a smile, "I drank and drank slowly. Qin Pingon, you should also do things leisurely. Don't make me just practice the sword here for a few days, so I didn't have the chance to make a sword, so I gave the Confucian temple back to Howren. The world, go directly to give you the last banquet of the next sect." Qin Pingon was too lazy to explain anything, but a voice rang in his heart. "Excuse me, the hermit, why is this?" Obviously it was the inquiry of the husband. Qin Pingon replied inwardly, "Mr. Zheng is staring over there, no mistakes can be made. This old master He who came from the sub-sage lineage has a very good relationship with his husband. Even if there was that 3-4 dispute, he still did not delay the old master's initiative to find him for a drink. He also heard from his brother Mao Xiaodong personally, that the old brother Cui Ying after betraying Wen Sheng's line, master He stopped in private, but couldn't stop it and even cursed in person. Therefore Qin Pingon explained a few more words and said in his own mind, the sudden deaths of the previous groups of remote monks, and the unsuccessful investigations of the monks of the Yin Yang family, can be regarded as a blinding method of the other party, which seems to be a barren world shot. It's very clean and tidy just for the real messiness in the future, most of which are waiting for this chance to be delivered by yourself. For example, assuming that this person is the plague god, it will be very troublesome and the younger generation dare to be sure. This assumption is definitely not the worst situation once it is true, it is indeed the plan of the monster race and no one on our side notices it. Then the situation will only get worse. One carelessness will result in disasters that can easily affect hundreds of thousands of people. The younger generation knows that during the previous discussions of the Confucian temple, they were prepared for all kinds of accidents such as the plague. I'm afraid that the other party is thinking about it without thinking. Old master, he asked, for the sake of caution, why don't I fly the sword alone to send the letter so as not to alarm the tattooed monk, but also remind Jing Juzhong? On the Great Wall of Jianqi, Qin Pingon is no longer just a direct descendant of cultural heritage, but also a hidden official. Qin Pingon nodded and said, of course it's because I didn't think thoroughly. Yifuzi smiled. The old scholar's Wensheng line, it is rare to have a good-tempered scholar. As for the series of seemingly nonsense movements by Qin Pingyun at the Confucian temple, the old master didn't feel how aggressive Qin Ping was, but a young man had to do it. Old master, he quickly got a letter from the tattooed Feijian. Beta Shengjing Juzhong only had 2 words about business affairs. Known. In addition to the business, there is another sentence: let the sage Chen Pingon help me talk to the hermit, and you can come to tattoo when you have time. In fact, old master, he did not mention Chen Pingon in the previous letter to the tattoo. The Confucian temple responsible for sitting in the sky to accompany the saints and sages raised his eyes and looked at the distance, then lowered his head to look at the blue shirt on the top of the city. The latter is certain that Jing Juzhong has already known the truth, and the former is certain that Qin Pingon is returning to the Great Wall of Jianqi. Ning Yao asked, "Would you like to see Jing Juzhong?" Qin Pingon thought for a while. Forget it. Facing the giant of the magic road, it was not easier than facing Wu Shuangjiang. The pressure was so great, it was exhausting, and it was even worse. I really don't want to be called Mr. Qin by Jing Juzhong anymore. It just made Qin Pingan's creeps. Qin Pingan leaned forward. In this half of the city, in addition to a few surnames, the big characters engraved on this half of the city also have Aoliang's fierce characters that are similar to those of a drunk. After being cut into a huge gap by the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain, it is broken into two pieces, which means that the ancient formation has been broken. The indestructible and always one sword Qi Great Wall can no longer escape the invisible time. The impact, other than that, the remaining half of the seat that has not been exposed to Qin Pingon Hedao, exposed to the sun, wind and rain, will damage the city wall. But as long as there are no major monks fighting here, even if they stand for thousands of years, there is no problem. Moreover, the large and small gravel left over from the city wall can indeed be used as a kind of superb material of heaven and earth. For example, the grindstone used as a magic weapon can be regarded as a kind of imitation dragon slicing platform. There is a huge disparity. In addition, even if it is just polished bricks and inkstones, it can be used as a desk confession for a mountain teacher or a literati scholar. At the beginning, this place was reduced to the jurisdiction of the barren world. Qin Pingon joined half of the road, and the other half, the sword Xiu Longjun, one of the great demon of the old throne, was responsible for staring at Qin Pingon. Close to the city, even staying at the corner of the wall, there will be life worries. There is no reason for the barren world. It was just that during the years when he fell into the wild world, he was safe and sound with almost no loss. I never imagined that it was reincorporated into the Hauran world, but it was beginning to be thief. Ning Yao said, "Go by yourself, I'll look elsewhere." Qin Pingon nodded, jumped off the top of the city, and the blue shirt on the back of the sword flashed. Ning Yao got up, went to the north of the city and walked on foot in the empty land. Among the strokes of the engraving in the city head, it is like a mountain plank road with a wide road. There are more than a dozen monks, both men, women and children. The two elders who are the guardians of this line deliberately set a distance with the younger generations and walked side by side to prevent the children from being uncomfortable. The younger generation's experience at the foot of the mountain, the Xianfu sect often likes to have a good relationship with the mountain tops. It is not only as simple as having a mutual reference. If the inheritance of the ancestors' incense depends on the generation of disciples to add fragrance and continue the lights, then it is with their own the incense on the mountain outside the door. This kind of travel is one of the best ways. These two guardians, the man is like a man under the mountain, but the woman is a girl, but in fact the true age of the latter is 100 years older than the former. A handwritten inkstone hung on the man's waist. It was an old inkstone with deep ink marks. The inscription was engraved with an immortal poem. He softly said with emotion, "The strange scene hanging in the sky in March, we can't see it." The woman hovered over her shoulder with a Tonghua bird resembling Wanfeng. She smiled and said, "The sword fairy Dong with the lettering on the head of the city is indeed superb with swordsmanship. It is a pity that I could not see that scene with my own eyes. The bright moon in the sky fell into the world. Even if I just wanted to, just thinking about it makes one's mind swaying. I heard that the pure sword intent that has been accumulated for thousands of years here is a gift left by the sword Immortal. There are so many threads and the number has not been scattered for thousands of years. It is said that the city has soared to the colorful world and taken half of it. Afterwards, many of them were stolen by those brutal sword repairmen from Tuo Yueshan. What a pity, what a pity. Anyway, we are not Jianxiu. My biggest regret is that, unlike you, I didn't see the female sword fairy with a swing on the top of the city with my own eyes. I don't know how beautiful Zhou Xian is. I also have this regret. A little far away from these two men and women, there is still a group of people busy. It is a few Nan Pasozhou fairies who have traveled together on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. They are opening a mirrored flower and water moon. It is just a picture scroll seen by the monks in their hometown and the picture must be blurred. If it was Hao and Luxiazu that were farther away, let alone the faces of the fairies, it is estimated that even their body contours would be unrealistic. During this long trip, they and a mountain baggage rented 2 square-inch objects together. Women traveled and there were too many belongings. How can 1 square-inch object be enough? Whose objects have more objects and occupy more land? Others, all of them are like mirrors, but don't talk about them. They are all close sisters and they care about this and it hurts their feelings. One of the fairies, wearing a dress in the style of a dragon girl, took out a landscape flower and bird roll. After spreading out the ground, there was a scene of flowers and trees growing, one after another, and birds stayed on the branches. Twitter, this fairy occupies the scene of this picture at this moment, graceful posture holding a small celadone bowl, gently throwing it to feed the birds. The remaining fairies standing outside the scroll for the time being, were whispering. The sword Immortal Wei Daijian from Beipingzu is worthy of being born in the Fengxue temple Xianxia. He is really graceful and full of immortality. When you look at it from a distance you will be excited. Don't laugh, who was almost going to go before. Talking to Wei Jin? The appearance is not inferior to that of Fu Su, just a few more glances will earn you money. Wei Jianxian is really good-tempered. Yesterday we were on the city head side and he didn't stop him, but the guy who winked at us was a bit obstructive and his face was not thin, he even licked his face to look at us. Get in there. It was said that it was a certain sword fairy embryo in Nanpasuazhou, which broke Jian Xian to the left and right. Later I went to Baopingzhou. I don't know why I came here to practice swords again. It depends on me. Hey, that woman seems to be the patriarch of the Red Xingshan Mountain in Surabaya, Zhu Yuan with the Taoist name Tong Xian? It must be because I recognize Zhou Xian, who was born in Chess in the Gingyun dynasty. I have seen it once from afar. It is said that he and Zhu Yuan almost became Taoists in their early years. Elsewhere on the plank road, a group of people are picking up rubble everywhere. This place is about a battlefield where there are fierce fights. It is rare that there are so many rubble. One of the guys picked up only one of them, the size of a palm. He squatted on the ground, smiled, and was satisfied that he could polish it into an inkstone for his own child. The little rabbit is not a sword repairer, but he faces the Great Wall of Jianqi, longing very much. And the man himself is a pure martial artist with a golden figure. Half of it travels the rivers and lakes, not where to go. Half of the reason is to be able to show a few words to his children, so he came here because it is similar to the Red Xingshan in Surabaya. Relationship follow here. At the edge of the plank road, someone appeared out of thin air, wearing a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes and a sword on his back. The uninvited guest said blankly, "Put it back." The man with the golden body state of Wufu was the first and only one to put down the gravel in his hands. The rest of the gas trainers from the 2 Middle-earth hills just got up, turned around, and no one was willing to give up the gravel that was about to become something in the bag. The ancestor monk from the patriarch of Hongxing Mountain in Surabaya, gently tossing the gravel in his hand, sneered, "Where is the troublesome ghost? You can hold it when you are full, can you manage it?" The man in the green shirt, who didn't know whether he was a sword repairer, nodded and said, "I can control it." Academy disciple? No. That's looking for smoke. Try it yourself. The young monk weighed it up. If by any chance he was the leader of the difficult ghosts on the mountain, he might not have been able to fight it. After all, he came here to travel and even carried a sword on his back. Maybe he was a sword repairman. Besides, when I was away from home I was taught by my teacher not to cause trouble, so I started to make sense. The Confucian temple did not say anything, and no travelers were allowed to take away the rubble of the city wall. They only said that monks were not allowed to fight or use attacking techniques. Why are you nosy? I never thought that the person came directly. Looking back, I asked the Confucian temple to make up this one, and I would chop my hands when I stole the rubble. Everyone was startled at first, then burst into laughter. Come on, you can rest assured this kind of guy can be beaten casually. The man also shook his head and laughed. How can there be such a young man who brags and doesn't make drafts? He hesitated for a while, gathered the sound and reminded, "This little brother don't cause trouble. Mr. Jia is the one who travels to Xian Pavilion. Second Shikiching, although it is not the immortal family of the Zhongzi head, it is not something ordinary people can afford, let alone Master Zhu or the patriarch of Hongxing Mountain. He can persuade you to go. The Confucian temple does not care about it, there is no need to manage." The squatting man picked up the gravel again. It's a pity that the young man who didn't know the heights of the sky turned on deaf ears. The man smiled instead. Say it again, put it all back. Then said to the man, you can make an exception. The man laughed, and the more young people talked, the more they became utterly meaningless. The disciple of Zhou Xian smiled and said, fuck your mother. The next moment, for some reason, the ancestor of the patriarch of the Wuxia pavilion faced the wall, bumped his head, his mouth was full of broken teeth, and all of them fell apart. After holding the blue shirt with one hand, he held down the head with one hand and twisted his wrist gently. The pain was so painful that the boy was heart-piercing, but the door was stuck to the wall and he could only whimper and vaguely. A female sister from Xianxia who wanted to rescue the man, her sleeves swayed, her hands were stern, each offering a water and fire spell, like two ropes of shining light twisted and smashed in the air. To the back of the green shirt. As a result, he was also inexplicably detained by the person, and he pressed the back of his head and slammed into the wall. The woman's originally handsome face was suddenly worn to blood by the wall. Two guardians, a man and a woman at the same time, the wind rushed and the Yufeng came. Zhou Xian said angrily, the thieves dare to commit murder. That Zhu Yuan had just sacrificed a destiny, and the next moment she knew that she had a bad feeling. Zhou Xian seemed to slam her head into the blue shirt, was slapped against the door, her wrist was turned over, and Zhou Xian was instantly hit on the ground. His body bounced on the ground before he fell limp and passed out on the spot. When Zhu Yuan was about to stop, she was slapped on her face with a slap. At the moment before she fell into a coma, she only heard the green shirt say, what is regret? Qin Pingon wiped the palms of his hands as if wiping them clean and said to the pure martial artist, you can take it away. The man silently put down the gravel in his hand. Qin Pingon smiled and said, don't get me wrong, I mean yes. The man silently picked up the fist-sized rubble again. Then it's up to you. Wearing a green shirt disappeared. The others were at a loss, looking at each other. A heart sounded in the hearts of everyone. An individual is dumbfounded. Get out of here. You can run as far as you can. He is the hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, so he wants to kill here. Anyway, He-Shou will definitely not stop him. Because I can't stop it. The man looked dull and opened his mouth wide. In shock, he looked down at the gravel in his hand, and felt that he had returned to his hometown and he could brag at the wine table. No one stopped, no one stopped. After the Confucian temple lifted the ban on the Xianxia mansion, two of the besieged scenes gradually spread on Haoran Tianxia Mountain. In the first game, of course, it was the Battle of Fuyazu, known as the Spectacular Under Heaven. Bai also took the initiative to show up with his sword, one man and one Tai Bai, and the sword picked half the throne. The second scene took place in the earlier battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It is rumored that many young sword repairmen from Jiashan account in the wild world besieged and killed Qin Shi, the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. A well-deserved duel on the mountain. One is a battle for genius among the younger generation, and it just so happens that their respective realms are not very different. Only the difference in numbers between the two sides is more interesting. The four sword repairmen of Jiashan account who carefully set up ambushes and besieged the hermits, without exception except for their excellent kendo talents, they are among the 100 sword immortals of Tuyue Mountain. All of them are in the front, and all of them are extremely prominent, almost reaching the sky. The background of mentorship. Li Zhen was the close disciple of the great ancestor Tuyueshan in the wild world. Rumor has it that he used to practice swords in the city for many years, but now he is missing. Geta is a big disciple of Lu Chakai Mountain who once ranked among the 14th realms. Yu Si is a sword repairer who was called the Sun by the old concubine of the old throne. Appeared in Tongyi's Hao and finally disappeared without a trace like Liz Hen. Tan, the old master of Yiluo, the direct disciple of the throne demon Yangji. Lu Bai, one of Wen Hai's close disciples of the great thief. And the people who rushed to the battlefield to support and attract were the ascendant sword repairmen who later became the co-lord of the wild world. A siege with no suspense about the victory or defeat, the hidden official turned out to kill Lu Bai. Ask the fist with the person and hand a fist to the opponent's face. Before Yu Yufu's head hit the wall. Afterwards there was the dispute between Gongdalin and Chao Ci in the Confucian temple. Why asking the punch is asking the face. This style of boxing is really unique. Fight on the battlefield, picking women to start. I heard that the sword repair was white, but she was a pretty demon clan female cultivator who I saw pity. This hidden official turned out to be a wonderful person. It's no wonder that as a foreigner, you can find a high position of the last hermit in the Great Wall of Jianqi. It's a pity that several Xianxia de Baos, including the Zhou Xian, mentioned the hermit's name and hometown. The rest of the mountain sects seemed to be tacitly understood. Most of them got some hint from the Confucian temple after the discussion. It's also a shame that the Confucian temple didn't reveal a certain secret matter. Otherwise the monk Howren's discussion of this siege would directly occupy the entire page of the Juzhou Xianxia Di report. Because Li Zhen went to heaven with Zhou Mi, and now takes over the highest position of the armored man in the old heaven. And that Jian Ziuxi, who was born in the land of the sky in the wild world, is also one of the highest gods in today's new heaven incarnation of the water god. However, gas trainers like Zhou Xian and Zhu Yuan who came to travel far away here did not have time to receive the Aquarius Mountain and Water diploma, and they did not see the copy of the mirror image. Qin Pingon returned to the original place of the city, sat cross-legged and waited quietly for Ning Yao to return. Chao Jun tutade, who said that he was not angry before? And Qin Pingan, your habit of beating people in cheeks, please change it later. Qin Pingon remained silent, but silently raised his head and looked towards the sky. Earlier in Dali capital, Aunt Feng asked about something in the Huoshan temple. Qin Pingon helped Mr. give the answer in exchange for 12 jars of Bai Huan Yang. The answer is only 4 words. Please enter the urn. And there is a calculation of bigger than the sky hidden in this. It is a please enter the urn that is destined to be unprecedented. Is it just for Zhou Mi who went to the sky? Is it just for Wen Hai Zhou Mi to enter the old heaven and no longer wantonly do harm to the world? Of course not, still not enough. During the discussions in the Confucian temple, Qin Pingon was taken to the top of Suishan mountain by the Holy Spirit and met the most holy master. Then I contacted the abbot of the saint of worship and the ancestor of the 3 Jiao ancestors who were watching the riverside discussion, an unbelievable test, and gathered many monks of the 14th realms besides Xing Juzhong. So Qin Pingon finally wanted to understand the bigger calculation of senior brother Cui Yang. Once lost in the Kaiyun game of Baidi City and failed to beat the Howren embroidered tiger, the last thing in this life, as if he was the scholar of the first disciple of Wen Xing, was in front of him on a chessboard of heaven and earth. Cui Yang was the only one who invited the most holy master, Buddha and Taoist master to sit together. It seems that Cui Huang not only needs to be careful, even if he succeeds in ascending the sky, he still falls short and can only lose badly. He still has to teach the world to teach patriarchs. Sort of coming chapter 846. There are many things at the end of the year and the update is very unstable. It will be much better next month. Qin Pingon glanced at the direction of Shirwan Dashan. That piece of separatist mountains and rivers that seemed to have been cut away from the barren world by the old blind man. The golden light above the earth was hazy. It was reflected by the golden-clad puppet responsible for moving the mountain, and there were autumn clouds on the heights. If the peak rises, the melting is too empty. Qin Pingon remembered the struggle for the blessed land of lotus root flowers in the past. It is very likely that within the next 100 years, a few worlds will be unprecedented in 10,000 years. On the highway, everyone is vying for crossing. Chance. Thinking of another matter, Qin Pingon whispered, Mr. beat me and I realized something with hindsight. It really shouldn't. Ning Yao asked curiously, what's the matter? Old Mr. Wen Xing, are you willing to beat your proud disciple? Qin Pingon said, Mr. reminds us that when we get together, I shouldn't always let you speak actively. Probably the many misunderstandings between people may be unintentional remarks that should not be said, but casual remarks that should be said are rather stingy. 2 mouths closed the door and murmured, but they were wrong, I thought the other party already understood it. Ning Yao looked strange. Qin Pingon asked, isn't that true? Ning Yao shook his head and said, of course not. The two get along no matter where they are, even if no one says anything. Ning Yao doesn't actually feel awkward. Besides, she really didn't have a word to talk to, chatting with him would never feel boring. Ning Yao couldn't help smiling and said, Mr. Student, one dare to teach and the other dare to listen. Qin Pingon smiled and said, then I can rest assured. Just as Ning Yao was about to speak, Qin Pingon had already taken the initiative to say, even if you don't care, I will speak more in the future. Qin Pingon continued, before the Li Xing was by the side, my heart's voice is no different. At the entrance of the inn, Li Xing said directly in the final analysis, because he regards you as a strong person who can talk with you on an equal footing. It will appear less polite. Ning Yao nodded and said, understand, the truth is that truth. So she didn't speak at that time. It is completely understandable and may not be accepted in full. But since the other party is a holy saint of hard work, her silence is the greatest respect. The ritual saints of the Central Turkish Confucian Temple, by Yujing's great headmaster, one ritual and one virtue, both sides are the most convincing. Sanjiao Patriarch Sandao, is the reason why you rushed to break the border after returning home? Ning Yao asked two questions straightforwardly. What should I do over there? Ning Yao is not unfamiliar with the issue of Sandao. In fact, the military solution of the Taoist monk is similar to a Sandao, but it is a helpless move by the Qi practitioner to prove the Tao without fruit and cannot break the life and death barrier. After that, Tao Fa and Qi flowed indefinitely, and all returned to heaven and earth, which was uncontrollable. Du Mao, a great monk of the ascendant realm of Tongye sect, was chopped to pieces by left and right. Du Mao tried to leave part of his Dao Yun and golden glaze to Yu Guizhong while he was still alive. Then there is the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain who can control his own luck and finally feed back to a wild world, making the destruction of the monster monks in the world in his hometown, like a springing up, brilliant, sovereign and Zhou Qingao without exception. Are all dragons and snakes veritable proud of heaven? As for Ning Yao's so-called, over there, of course it was the old heaven where Zhoumi had ascended into the sky. Qin Pingon squatted down, held out his palm against the city's head, gently rubbed his head, glanced up at the sky and said, what should I do over there? The three teachers' patriarch has his own plan. I can only definitely not let it go. I went to Zhongtu to participate in the discussion of the Confucian temple. During that period there was that extremely hidden riverside meeting. With the exception of me, a large number of monks of the 14th realms were gathered. Many of them were the first time I saw them. Like a big test, the target of the test is the three great monks who are already standing on the top of the mountain, but no one of the three teachers has appeared by the river, but the specific content of the assessment after the discussion is over, it seems that everyone I had forgotten it. I thought it was a bit strange at the time, why the patriarch of the three teachings had to spend so much time. Later my husband took me to the top of Suishan Mountain and saw the most holy master. At that time I noticed some signs. Moreover, the most sacred master didn't hide anything and said to me, if it was barely regarded as praise, it was tantamount to acquiescing to it. Qin Pingon guessed that it was a questionnaire with life and death as the test questions. The answer was the results of the 14th level monks' individual questions, such as, a large group of 14th level monks went to the new heaven together. Dare you not, would you like it? Reluctant to give up life and forget death for all the beings in the world. Qin Pingon once had a question and answer with the four people in the picture scroll. Regarding the need to kill to save someone, Julien's answer back then was that he would not kill or save because he was worried that he was the just in case. At that time Qin Pingon didn't say much. In fact, Brother Cui Yang gave another extreme answer, not only to save people but also to actively become the one. Of course, Brother Cui Yang is extremely useful, and the person saved must be all the people in the world. What they do is the one who gives up to me, and the Brother Cui Yang is willing to become one. Qin Pingon reminded, be careful of Lu Qin eavesdropping. A heartfelt voice immediately sounded, how is it possible? Poor Dao is not such a person. Ning Yao didn't say a word, his mind moved slightly and his sword light fell straight. Following the beginning of his heart he broke through the bands on mountains and rivers, and found the hiding place of the three masters of Bai Yujing. A young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown appeared hurriedly from the sea of clouds at the top of the city. Running around, a sword light followed like a shadow. Lu Qin shrank the mountains and rivers again and again, and vigorously waved the sleeves of the Taoist robe to deflect the sword light many times. He yelled, good, a good pair of poor Daoists who spared no effort to match the gods and Taoists who were old in the same month. One Wenguang shot the stars and the other sword spirit pierced Changhong. It is a match made in heaven that has never been seen in 10,000 years. Ning Yao glanced at Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon smiled and shook his head, forget it. Ning Yao put away the fierce sword light that persisted. The 14th realm great monks came to the other world and there were many rules. Lu Qin traveled through the Lizhu cave and set up stalls and fortune-telling. He followed Howren's old rules and suppressed him in the ascending realm. Now that the Great Wall of Sword Qi belongs to the territory of the Howren world, Lu Chen once again returns to his hometown from the Qingming world. Of course he still needs to follow the rules set by the Li Xing. It's just a saying that Dashuan Duguan Sun Daochang only circulated on the top of the mountain by Yu Jingla's 14th realm. No one can beat it and no one can beat it. In addition to Lu Chen falling on the top of the city, only a few steps away from Qin Pingon, a middle-aged man's sword repairman, criminal officer Hao Su, walked out of the sea of clouds. Hao Su's figure fell on the top of the city, standing beside Lu Chen, squinting his eyes to look at the wild world. As a criminal officer, in fact, he has been in prison for the deaf children, devoting himself to practicing Taoism and swordsmanship. Hao Su has always been wondering why the boss Xian didn't ask him anything until the end. Qin Pingon was still squatting, holding a fist in a salute to him. Hao Su didn't turn his head, but leaning and holding a fist in the direction of Qin Pingon, as a response to the hidden official of the Great Wall of Jianqi. The hermit and criminal officer reunited at Jianqi Great Wall, looking very casual. Qin Pingon asked, "Nan Guangzhou was slaughtered by seniors?" Hao Su nodded. "The price is much lower than expected. Anyway, I was not detained in Gongdalin and I was fishing with Lu Cha." The meaning of Li Xing means that Hao Su killed Nan Guangguang, a monk in the Ascension realm of the Middle Earth. It was banned, and the Confucian temple considered at its discretion, allowing Hao Su to kill one of the Ascending Realm Great Demon or two Fairy Realm Demon clan monks. So Hao Su continued to stay in Howren world, and the opinions of the saints of rituals often made people disagreed. In fact, with Hao Su's temperament, it is not impossible to fight hard with swords, because Dao's second child will be at the border of the two worlds, but Hao Su feels that it is unnecessary. Besides, provoke anyone, don't provoke the saint. Lu Chen sat on the edge of the city head, his legs hung down, his heels tapped the city head lightly, and he sighed. Pan Dao is on the site of the city lord by Yu Jinggua, licking his face and begging for charity, and he created a shabby sesame mung bean size. The study named Guangqianjian's Hai seems to be less bold. No one paid any attention. If left in by Yujing, how could it be so cold? Glancing to the south, Lu Chen stretched out his hand to support the Taoist crown, which was by Yujing's cult treasure, and said, "This Huang Wan really has a good vision. I know how to imitate the poor Taoist lotus crown, but it's a bit of luck. It's not helpful, otherwise I must ask him for a few greetings this time." Lu Chen turned his head to look at Qin Pingon and said with a smile, "Seeing river anglers, how dare you ask Chulun how many years?" Qin Pingon sneered and said, "Receive the rod and hang the fish basket and the waste sickle to cut autumn leeks?" Ning Yao and the criminal officer Hao Su turned a deaf ear to these two dumb riddles. The two sword repairmen were people who didn't like to think too much, and it was precisely the people who were most willing to think about them were sitting next to each other. Lu Chen said solemnly, "Qin Pingon, I said it back then. If you take a good look, you will actually look good. At that time you still looked suspicious. What was the result? Now you believe it?" Qin Pingon said, "If I remember correctly, Dao Chonglu hadn't said anything like this back then." Lu Chen stretched out his hand and rubbed his chin. "Did you accidentally forget it or did you remember it wrong?" Qin Pingon clenched fists with both hands and gently propped it on his knees. Lu Chen blinked with a hopeful expression on his face and asked, "Qin Pingon, when waiting to be a guest in the Qingming world, when the time comes, Xiang Dao can help lead the way to Bai Yujing God Xiaocheng Ziki Tower and keep it unimpeded. Don't you know now in Bai Yujing, among the foreigners who live in the world, you, the hidden official, is the most curious and expectant and one of the least, and there is also Miss Ning in Feixingcheng, a wild world. Of course there are also Wu Fuchao Ci and the sword repairer Lu Kai who was able to defeat Qin Shi. But Bai Yujing's interest in Lu Kai's servant is that one person can own two poor masters. The sword-raising gourd cultivated by your own hands is still inferior to yours. Now this 100 years, it is the second head teacher Yudo who is responsible for the affairs of the abbot Bai Yujing. In the next 100 years, it will be Lu Chen's turn to supervise Qingming." Qin Pingon was silent. The night sailing made Qin Pingon feel a little bit more stable. According to my husband's analogy, even the most holy teacher and the saint of worship, look at the night ship that goes without a trace on the sea, like an undetectable mosquito in a common master's house, which means Qin Pingon was careful enough and his whereabouts were secretive enough to have a chance to avoid Bai Yujing's sight. Furthermore, Qin Pingan's 14-level harmony opportunity is most likely in the Qingming world. Lu Chen seemed to see through Qin Pingan's mind, slapped his chest like a drum and vowed, Qin Pingon, what do you think? What kind of friendship is between us? So as long as I will take care of Bai Yujing at that time, even if you rise from the awe-inspiring world with a sword. Hitting Bai Yujing, I can open one eye and close the other. Qin Pingon nodded and said, then it's settled. Lu Chen looked surprised and guilty and said embarrassedly, huh? I just said it casually, are you serious? Seeing that Qin Pingon started to be a boring gourd again, Lu Chen was deeply moved. Look, it's no different from the boy in Niping Alley back then. He patted his knee lightly with one palm and started talking to himself. I often see myself. It is equivalent to Tao in a comfortable nest in the peaceful village of Xianxia. First forget the form and content and then forget the words. The artifact is unique in the realm of Shenming. Everything is one with me and then leaves the dust and returns to nature. Qin Pingon frowned and said nothing. Lu Chen raised his hand and twisted a leaf with the aura of heaven and earth. After releasing his finger, the leaf was suspended in the air and then fell. With a wave, the leaf was taken along and changed its trajectory, and the route involuntarily moved closer to Lu Chen's hand. Qin Pingon knew what Lu Chen wanted to say. This is a drag and approach of human nature by other things. Among the other things, of course, the pure divine nature is the most seductive and the most fascinating. It is also an extremely concealed and natural method set by the ancient gods for the human race. It is not only a shortcut on the road of spiritual practice, but also a bottleneck restricting the climb to the top of the ancient gods. There are countless roads under the feet of the world's cultivators, the first-class authentic Taoism orthodox traditions, the second-class side door, the second-class crooked door, and the mountaineering people who have a pure two-word prefix, only Jianxiu and Wufu, and these two roads happen to be regarded as the road to the end. One is extremely difficult to break the bottleneck of the ascension stage, and the other always stops at the 10 stage. In the past 10,000 years, Qin Qingdu was the only one who truly entered the 14th realm as a pure sword repairer. Because the dragon-cutting man who often sends people under the fence, and likes to play around with the world, took a shortcut to enter the 14th realm through a convenient method, and used some kind of ambition and magical power of Buddhism. After that was Xiao Deng, who took up the post of a hermit, and her path of harmony was even further away from the pure word. Combining with the Hall of Valor in the wild world is equivalent to being in harmony with the land, and she almost voluntarily gave up the purity of sword repair. Then came the 14th realm of Lu Cha of the Old Throne. Unfortunately, he failed to stabilize the realm, so Qin Chunan resolutely knocked it down to a realm. And this subsage, who is born in the same line and shoulders the sun and the moon, does it what kind of feat it became? The awe-inspiring world trainers beyond the top of the mountain are still unknown. An Yu Do, the second head of Bai Yujing and Sun Daochong of Daxuan Duguan, possess the purest Taoist dynastic lineage and are also swordsmen. Not talking about lending the fairy sword Tai Bai is equivalent to giving up the 14th realm Daochong, just this one known as the true and invincible Dao second child, precisely because he reached the pinnacle in Dao Fa. Even if his swordsmanship is superb, he suffers a lot from the term pure sword repair. Between the dragon slasher, Qin Qinglu, and the hermit Xiao Deng, Aliang had a Confucian background who could not get around, but his 14th level swordsmanship was the closest to Qin Qingda's purity, so a few mountain monks in the world, especially the 14th level monks, waited until Aliang fell to the realm, similar to the female champion who participated in the riverside discussion in the Qingming world, even if it was not an enemy of Aliang and even did not fight with Aliang. After dealing with each other, she will also breathe a sigh of relief. No matter how big the world is, let alone the world is bigger, but for the 14th realm sword repair, where can't it go? One accidentally, the legendary sword fighting retrograde time is possible. If it is on the way upstream, there are other means to avoid the sight of the patriarch of the three religions and the saint of worship. Except for Bai Zhe and Tuo Yushanda, the ancestor, the old blind man, the 14th level cultivator with the longest years and the oldest qualifications who did not kill. As the peak sword repairman of the 14th realm, Qin Qingdu would have to cocoon himself and choose the Great Wall of Hadao sword qi if it were not for Tuoshan's death. Otherwise he would be alone and travel far away with the sword? Especially if Qin Qing is able to make progress on this long river of time? So once a certain 15th realm sword repair appeared in the world, I am afraid that the ancestors of the three teachings are really powerless to stop him. Do everything you want, whether you want to use the sword or not. It depends on your preference, and the sword is handed out. Lu Chen suddenly smiled and said, Qin Pingan, if you can get to the top of the martial arts first, I am looking forward to the scene of you asking Bai Yujing in the future. Daoist Dynasty female warlord Pei Cup, Dali Wufu Song Chongjing. Both of them are not really 11-realm Wufu, as if only 1 foot crossed the threshold temporarily. Qin Pingon said, "That's too early, let alone if there will be 2 talks that day. Daoist Lu doesn't need to expect anything specifically for this." Lu Qin squinted and said, "Qin Pingon, everyone knows your style of boxing, and now Qingming has heard about the dispute between Qingming and Qingming." Qin Pingon said, "You think too much." Lu Qin glanced at Qin Pingan's wrist, shook his head and said, "No, you want less." Qin Pingon asked, "What are you doing here? You won't just be talking nonsense with me, right?" Lu Qin raised his head and smiled. Now there are only 2 rounds left in the wild 3 rounds. Pang Dao came to take a look as soon as possible. God knows if it will be accidental. There will only be 1 round left, right? Qin Pingon said, "Maybe." The 2 sword repairmen of the Great Wall of Jianqi rushed to a ferry at the Yulongzong ruins via an intercontinental ferry from Luxiazu, which had just finished their tour, to return to their hometown. One is Qin Sanqiu, who is more and more regretting not sneaking into the 5th world, and the other is Dai Zhang, the owner of the liquor store. She feels that she has 3 greatest luck in her life. When she was a child, she helped Aliang buy wine and met Ning Yao. These friends finally partnered with Qin Pingon to open a wine shop. In fact, in addition to the Great Wall of Jianqi, the Upside-Down Mountain Jialonggu and Yulongzong are all battlefield sites to be precise. The largest mountain in the world, the Upside-Down Mountain like Feixingcheng, all go to other worlds, but the vicinity of Jialonggu and Yulongzong were temporarily built into ferry crossings by the Confucian Temple. The new lord of Yulongzong is now the mistress of Shuijinggong, one of the 4 largest private residences in the Fallen Mountain. But the interesting thing is that Zhou Xian declared to the outside that he was only temporarily holding the post of suzerain. Back then she took people to travel and practice, landed from Tonggishao and went northward, touring Aquarius Island and Beiju Luzhou successively, and was able to escape by chance and kept the incense for Yulongzong. A landscape ferry, a transcontinental ferry named Taiging on Ibai Island. Before going south, the 2 groups of monks, Yuxian and Hongxingshan, took this transit ferry. Today the old steward found that the young monks in the team were afraid seeing the strangeness of people. He asked in doubt, "A good trip, how come you got into trouble with people? Could it be that I met an enemy at the Great Wall of Jianqi, right?" Zhu Yuan smiled bitterly, her face was rather bleak. She said with lingering fear, "I met the hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi and there was a conflict." The old manager was taken aback when he heard the words and said, "Then why don't you know how to run?" Zhou Xian said helplessly, "That's why we have to run fast." The old steward nodded, deeply convinced. When you meet the master, not running is the right answer. If you stand still, you can be beaten less. The old steward immediately comforted, "Don't think too much, teach the hermit personally. It's actually not a shame. When you get back to your hometown, you still have a lot of money to talk about and you don't lose money." Glancing at the young men and women again, the old man smiled and said, "Chao Ci of the Daoist Dynasty is not only slightly better than you. Besides, you can relax a little bit. The hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is a little better. The business is refreshing and the young man is not deceived." Old manager Dai Hao is an old acquaintance of Yuxian Pavilion and Hongxingshan. Hearing the comforting words of this old friend, Zhou Xian couldn't laugh or cry, and Zhu Yuan couldn't help laughing. The old steward smiled with his beard and was complacent, like a certain alcoholic who recalled the feats of the past on the wine table. "You don't know, back then I was in the Spring Banner House when I went down the mountain before running away. It's not that I, Dai Hao, brag indiscriminately here. At that time the atmosphere called a solemn, tense sword and the house was full of solemn killings. Those of us were just businessmen doing fairy transactions. How could we have seen such battles?" Everyone was silent and then I was the first to speak. Dai Hao raised his thumb and pointed to himself. "How many sword immortals of the Great Wall of Sword Qi were there at the time? I couldn't count them with both hands and there were 11. If you add Qin Yingguan, Yan Ming and Nailan Saihuan, Yuaning, that's a total of 14. Just ask ordinary outsiders, who are in front of these murderous sword repairmen who dare to speak first. Don't ask what a sword is." During that discussion, there was a vast expanse of the sword fairy who rushed from the Great Wall of Jianqi to the Fallen Mountain in the lobby of Chunfan's High. Miyu Wei Jin Sunjun Gao Kue Yuan Qingshu Xie Songhua Pu He Song Pin Xie Li Kai +1 host Xiao Yunyan. There are also 2 Yuan Ing Jianxiu Yan Ming and Nailand Saihuan. 11 sword immortals, 2 Yuanying realm sword repairs. Dai Hao sighed. I and the young hidden official, it can be said that we met at first sight. We talked and laughed happily. Qin Yingguan is not very young and we talk about learning everywhere. Zhou Xian had no choice but to agree with him. I helped the Chunban's high discussion and made a good start, so that the subsequent progress went smoothly, and Brother Dai contributed a lot. Dai Hao nodded. Yes, we businessmen who are covered in copper stinks can also be regarded as contributing to the later grand strategy. As for the truth anyway, none of the fairy stewards who were present at the scene were present at the moment, so it was naturally caused by Dai Hao. In fact, after Dai Hao got up and opened his mouth, he said some fair words about the needle hidden in the cotton, and then said something to the young hidden official Yin and Yang. As a result, under the old man's butt, a chair seemed to be full of flying swords. Dare to sit down. The old steward sighed for no reason. Whether you do business or behave, you still have to talk about conscience. Squinting at the 2 young men and women, Dai Hao smiled and said, if you suffer a loss, you will have a better memory or you will suffer for nothing. When you go out of the mountain, you are not a father or a mother and no one will be used to each other. A descendant of the ancestor of Wuxia Pavilion, a fairy from Red Xingshan Mountain in Surabaya. He came to the Jianqi Great Wall ruins before. On the ferry he likes to make eyebrows. Do you really think you are a couple of gods? Dai Hao followed this Taiging ferry boat all year round. He hadn't seen anyone. Although the old steward did not practice well, his eyes were so old, he saw the look of the young man and woman changed slightly. Dai Hao said, it looks like it was a waste of time. These 2 young people have no arrogance, but there is no shortage of arrogance. Maybe this means that the dog can't change it. Life is not a slaughterhouse everywhere, not so much blood. The world is full of dog slaughterhouses and dog blood is scattered everywhere. Dai Hao said heartily, Brother Jiao, I am not familiar with Juyuan and Hongxing Mountain, so I shouldn't be the wicked person. On your side, I am willing to say something more. I will protect the road and walk down the mountain in the future. An idiot pastes a yellow mud in his crotch. It is easy to leak when he takes off his pants. Don't take it off. Reach out and wipe it. It is an indecent gesture of digging out the crotch. It is a joke in the eyes of outsiders. Zhou Xian sighed. Brother Daoist's words are rough but not rough. Dai Hao smiled while stroking his beard. Coarse grains nourish the stomach and talk alive. On the side of the Yulong ancestors' temple ruins in Daxing, she stood on the top of the mountain and she was full of emotions. Stay in the Green Mountains without worrying about no firewood. So the young hermit was right. If it hadn't been for the reminder of the young man, the incense of Yulongzong that lasted for thousands of years would have been completely cut off in the hands of the beasts in the wild world. A secret letter sent to the Shuijing Palace that time contained only 2 words on the paper. Moving north. It was once discarded by the senior sister, and was put away again by the cloud sign and carefully cherished it. In addition to the text on the letter, in addition to the sword Immortal Xiao Yunyin's monogram, there were also 2 ancient seals, hermit. At the beginning she successfully took away 62 genealogical monks, including 3 of them. Later during the journey he successively collected more than a dozen disciples, plus the monks gathered from the islands under the jurisdiction of the Yulongzong. There were still less than 100 people, but this is all the family of the Yulongzong today. Yunxian is now waiting for someone, that is, the future sect master of Yulong sect, the sword repairer of the Great Wall of Sword Nayland Saihuan. Now Nayland Saihuan is already a sword fairy in the Yupu realm. Back then Nayland Saihuan proposed a deal. Yunxian was not the kind of person who crossed the river and demolished bridges. What's more, Yunxian was willing to treat her as the sect master of Yulong sect. On a ferry that is about to arrive at Dali capital, Dali domain King Song Jisun smiled and said, Shigue, you are all ascended, when will I help you change your household registration? In the household of Huaihuang County's government office, Zigui's birthplace was still a maid's hometown, and the prefectural government and even the Dali Ministry of Rights naturally copied it. Zigui's eyebrows were soft and he shook his head and said, You don't need to change it, just use it to remind yourself that you don't forget your roots. It seems that she was still the master and servant of Mud Bottle Alley back then, carrying water and clothes, washing vegetables and cooking, spending money and buying belongings, and when the items in the house were too many to fit, she just sold them and became hers. Private money. Song Jisun smiled. When do you have an idea, tell me. He glanced at her profile, both familiar and unfamiliar. Haoran's water transport in the world is divided into two by the Zhongtu Confucian Temple. The Lady of Lush Viking with the road number Qingzhong is in charge of the land and water transport of Jiuzhou. In addition, the Four Seas transportation was divided into four, and each of the four sea areas had a great water monarch. Even if it was cut into four parts of jurisdiction, any single water area would still be vast and boundless. Among them, 3 of the Great Lake Water Lords were promoted to the high position of the High Sea Lords, ranking first in the newly compiled genealogy of the Zhongtu Confucian Temple, and the same rank as the great god of Zhou Xian. And as the only real dragon in the world, she is only the king of Dong High Sea. If she was the Zhigui before the war, she would feel that the Confucian Temple acted like this, and it would be a deliberate humiliation. But now Zhigui just sneered a few times, and then she accepted the throne of High Sea King without any push or hindrance. On Luapa Mountain, the old cook recently made a small cotton satchel for millet grains to hold more melon seeds. Millet's love for small satchels is not lost to the golden pole at the slightest. It is new and not tired of old. Today a carp hit stiffly. After getting up, the millet grains stomped on the ground and overslept again. He picked up a mirror, pointed at the mirror surface and said, "What's the matter?" and slept again. Still smiling? Take it as an example. If you sleep late, I'm going to treat you to pickled cabbage fish. Are you afraid? Qin Lingjun still ran to Qilong Lane twice in 3 days, busy looking for Brother Jia to talk about Dashan. As the old and the young, the chariots on the wine table repeatedly said, and no one was tired. Meet the children of the about age in the small town. Qin Lingjun bounced around, swaying from side to side, jumping up and throwing fists to scare people. The little mute read a lot of books with the shopkeeper Shi Ro, and made a special trip to Red Candle Town, carrying a huge bag of books back to the shop. The shopkeeper Shi Ro smiled and asked if you had money. The little mute shook his head and said directly about the money. What's the matter? I found the shopkeeper and said that the old cook asked me to help buy it, and the money will be made up later. This is also okay? The little dumb grinned. I was responsible for something, but I would return it if it didn't work. Anyway, there was no missing word in the book. Yo, people with masters are different, they are very horizontal. What? Once Zhu Lian accompanied Qin Lingjun down the mountain to ride Longxiang, the little mute gave him a few books, saying that he bought it for the old cook, so thank you for it, but don't forget to go to Hongzhou town to check out. Zhu Lian's eyes lit up. He turned a few pages casually, coughed a few times and complained, "The old man is all righteous. You actually helped me buy such a book?" The little mute stretched out his hand. "Don't just pay me back. The old cook has put a few books in his sleeve." Qin Lingjun sighed and complained to the old cook, saying that at the beginning I did not recommend the little mute to go down the mountain and work as an errand at the shop. It would be easy to learn. In the 100,000 mountains, the disciples and watchdogs are not there, and for the time being, only the old blind man is left alone. Today's guest is a man wearing a blue shirt and cutting a dragon, now alias Qin Qinglu. Qin Qinglu asked with a smile. I heard that the predecessor has accepted an open disciple for an unprecedented time. The old blind man nodded. Standing on the edge of the cliff, Qin Qinglu said for no reason, "It was a long time ago that I realized that the tip of the hook can be exposed by fishing with earthworms." The old blind man said in a bad breath, "Stop talking about these vain heads." Fulu Yushuan of Hedao Xinghe opened his eyes and saw a young man with a bag hanging from his waist. The latter was a well-deserved step-by-step fight, volleying through the sky, using stars as a ferry. The 3 ancient mountains are in charge of life and death. The ancient 5 sacred mountains, the 5 elements functioned. Yu Xian glanced at the inconspicuous bag, curious about how many talismans were in it. Millions, 10 million? Today Qin Lingjun had nothing to do. After chatting with Brother Jia, he wandered alone in the small town. Finally, he took a trip to his master's mud bottle alley to see if there were any thief. Then he rose from the wind and planned to return to Luapa Mountain. Inadvertently lowered his head and found a few fresh-faced characters coming, looking at people who are like cultivators, but they seem to be in realm. I saw a middle-aged monk standing by the water by the Longshu River, outside a school in the town, an old master standing outside the window, and a juvenile Taoist boy riding a bull in from the east gate. Sword of Coming Chapter 848. The 2 deceased people, who are very different in age but deeply involved, are now squatting on the head of the city, and they are exactly the same, hooking their shoulders, holding their hands in sleeves, looking at the southern battlefield ruins together. Lu Chen turned his head and looked at the young man next to him and smiled. If we two learn from the old Yang again now and each take a dry tobacco rod and vomit the clouds and fog, it will be even more comfortable. Gaodengcheng the Wanli watching Su is sorrowful to the world. The old man in the backyard of the Yang family drugstore once ridiculed that the patriarch of the three teachings was the biggest brave in the earth that day, and he only ate but did not vomit. What Qin Pingon saw in his eyes was sparse vegetation shaking his sword aura, as if he saw the white bones forming a hill. The sword aura was rushing to fight a bull, a sword repairman on the battlefield, once drunk lying in the corridor, leaning against the smoke cage holding a Jiuquan cup. Swordsmen and celebrities are all romantic. It seems that I have seen the first step of the summer palace to worry about the seedlings, and I will never return. It seems that I have seen Gao Kuei's first sword in this life learned from the ancestor. So the last sword, when asked the ancestor Long Jun, there are female sword immortals Zhou Xian and Lao Jianxiuyinshan has long been determined to die. There is Tao Wen who can only be relieved by death on the battlefield, and there is a young sword repairer who was originally graceful and magnificent. He turned his back to the city head and faced the south, handing his sword to death. Lu Chen looked at this young hidden official with no sorrow on his face and sighed. Qin Pinyin, you are in a high position at a young age and you have made an unworldly contribution to the Confucian temple. Who dares to believe? To be honest, if I were in a small town back then, I would not believe anyone who had told me what happened today would be killed. In the sky of Lizhu Cave, Lu Chen once took He Xiaoyang, who was under his turn to the door, to meet many different Qin Pinyin. There was a Qin Pinyin who became a man of good faith by his diligence. The ancestral house he still bought a family property in Zhouqing. Only in the Qingming festival and New Year's Day did he take his family and go back to his hometown to go to the grave. Qin Pingon, with his heart and eyes, became a small business with a small family property. Ping Ping continued to go back to be that kiln worker apprentice, and his craftsmanship became more and more proficient, and eventually became a dragon kiln master. Some Qin Pings turned into a wanderer who complained about the sky and others. In years, it became a joke for the people of the small town. And Qin Pingon participated in the imperial examination. He only earned fame as a teacher in the school. He never married a wife in his life. He has been to the farthest places in his life, namely the Zhouqing office and Hongzhou town. He often stood alone at the entrance of the alley, staring blankly at the sky. Lu Chen actually started cooking wine, got busy on his own, lowered his head and smiled. When the sky is snowy, it is best to drink a glass. After all, the self of today is not the self of yesterday. Qin Pingon smiled. I'm not Master Lu. I'm scary when listening to the sky and the sea. I can't even think about it. It's just an old saying in my hometown that I can overcome the poor. There is more than that every year, and every year can pass the year after year without suffering. Lu Chen nodded and said, the townsfolks are simple, and there are many old slang words in the town. I have learned it and benefited a lot. I have only learned a little bit of fur skills after setting up a stall in your hometown, otherwise I will be in the world. Over there, every time I go to Dashuan, I will pay a visit to Daochang's son, so whoever teaches others how to behave is more important. I don't know if it was caused by Lu Chen's words or because the third master Bai Yujing used his magical powers, and it really started to snow, and it was a veritable goose feather snow with snowflakes as big as hands, some in the Wei and Jin dynasties. Chao Jun, the foreigners who traveled at the head of the city, were naturally pleasantly surprised. During the heavy snow season, the scenery became more and more exquisite. The land was wide and the people were sparsely cold, and the small snow closed the mountains and Dafeng River. Lu Xin, who was busy cooking wine, sighed with emotion. When you go out, you must walk steadily, eat slowly, and speak well, be kind to others, make money, make noise, fight and kill. Really meaningless. Qin Pinyin, do you think it is such a rationale? Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. This phrase here and now sounds very reasonable. Ning Yao is next to him. There was a criminal officer Haosu standing beside Lu Chen. Moreover, neither Qi Tingji nor Lu Ji left the city for the time being. All four of them are from the Great Wall of Jianqi. Only this guy, whose hometown was in the Haoran world but went to Qingming world and became the third master of Bai Yujing, was a not very pleasing outsider. So before Lu Chen said this to Qin Pingon, he secretly asked Haosu in his heart, "Sir, if the hermit let you chop me, wouldn't you do it?" Haosu gave the answer without hesitation. Otherwise, what Qin Pingon said doesn't work. Here, I will seriously consider it. In fact, Lu Chen was most disgusted with fighting on the mountain, unless it was a last resort. For example, traveling in the Lizhu cave or going to the outer heavens to compete with those inexhaustible transfiguration demons. If it were not for the brothers to protect the way, he would have to return to Howren's hometown. He didn't care if Qi Jingchun could establish a teaching title. Ancestor. There is not much more in the world and there is not much less. The world is not the same world and the world is not the same world. What does it matter to him? But as lazy as Zhou Xian, he also has people who admire him, such as Sui Qugong Wu Shuangjiang's infatuation and paranoia. Sun Daochong said that the fairy sword Tai Bai was borrowed, but it was actually given to Bai Yi, which was a kind of freedom to be a chivalrous spirit. Sun Huaizhong, as the fifth person in the Qingming world, is also the leader of the Taoist sword Immortal line. Once the old master holds Tai Bai and enters the 14th realm, Lu Chen's truly invincible second senior brother must also raise his spirit and do a good job. Frame. As for Qin Qingdu, the eldest sword fairy, he is not free here in exchange for the great freedom of the Great Wall of Sword Qi in the colorful world for thousands of years in the future. It is a kind of great freedom of people's hearts. As a hidden official, Qin Pingon joined the Great Wall of Jianqi, unable to help himself, and his heart did not turn back. Lu Chen's only regret was that Qin Pingon failed to kill an ascending demon by himself and engraved on the city's head. No matter what words Qin Ping's engraved, he only said the handwriting and divine meaning. Lu Chen felt that it was just to look at the lettering. It's worth sneaking here from time to time from Bai Yujing. Lu Xian handed Qin Pingon a bowl of wine. Looking at the momentum you used to sit and talk about the Tao, you have a good reputation among the immortals. It is very good and gratifying. I am here to congratulate you first. As for the gift, I owe it first. For a few more years after you arrive in the Qingming world, even if you ask me for it, I will go to some familiar towers in Bai Yujing to visit the autumn breeze. Qin Pingon didn't seem to be wary. He took the wine bowl and drank. Lu Chen raised his arm high and handed it to Haosu, who was standing next to him. The hidden officer and criminal officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi received it. Lu Chen leaned forward and asked, Miss Ning, would you like to have a bowl too? It is the unique fairy brew of Baiyijing Verdant City. Jiang Yunxing just became the lord of the city. I asked for it. Jiang Yunxing is the one with Dejin Xianzhang. The little Dao boy who Lu took care of the door together. Now this little is considered prosperous, and he dare not put me in his eyes, taking office every bite. Ning Yao said, no. Lu Chen did not dare to force this. Many veteran Taoists in Bai Yujing are now worried about whether all Taoist forces in the colorful world and Qingming world will give Ning Yao a sword one day in the future and drive them out. Qin Pingon took a sip of wine and asked, where does the Taoist formula come from? The 12th floor of the 5th city of Bai Yujing on the monument next to buried river water temple? The predecessor of Bai Bio Mansion was a Dadyulong palace in Tongyi's Hao, but it was too old for years, and even Jiang Shangzhen's Yuguazong has no evidence to investigate. It is only on the place of the Dequan dynasty. Zhong Kui didn't tell the reason for the legend of Zhiguai, and there was no record at Dafu Academy. Lu Chen wiped the corners of his mouth, shook the wine bowl gently and said casually, oh, it means that the 5,000-character Taoist art of the jade slip turned into a 4-day cool, but I knew it. To be honest, I do have a sesame mung bean-sized relationship with me and relax. There is really no long-term calculation for this matter. It is not aimed at anyone, and those who are predestined get it, nothing more. Qin Pingon asked, do you want me to teach it to Qin Lingjun? This is the real reason why Qin Pingon hasn't taught this Taoist formula for a long time. He would rather teach Shui Jiao Hongxiao in the future, rather than let Qin Lingjun get involved. Lu Chen sighed without giving an answer directly. I guess this guy is unwilling to go to Qingming Tianxia. Forget it, it's going to rain Yang to marry, so just let him go. Qin Pingon curiously asked, what is the relationship between Qin Lingjun and that dragon girl? Is it worth your attention? Lu Chen rolled his eyes and said, you have many ways, so check it out yourself. Isn't there an anti-Feng in Dali capital? Your true body is a few steps away from the Temple of Fire. Anyway, you might be able to cheat away a few jars of Bai Huanyang easily. In addition to sweeping away the 100 Flowers fortune land, Anti-Feng also has an illusion of wormwood burning the dragon girl's forehead, which is a kind of protection for the dragon girl. The last escape route of the real dragon in the world seems to be panic. He took the initiative to land ashore at Ao Ping Chao. In addition to looking for Old Man Yang's ascending platform, he also hopes that the avenue that fits the wind and water can help mediate from it. Say a few good things, otherwise Old Man Yang, a young man with the gods and the gods Tianjun has no reason to ignore the life and death of a real dragon. What's more, in the eyes of the vast majority of the remnants of ancient gods, the genus of the world's flood dragons who are in charge of water transport, are all rebellious. Qin Pingon asked again, the road is hydrophilic. Is the aptitude of the earth immortal before breaking the natal porcelain? Is it an angel, or is it not mysterious and shaped by the day after tomorrow? Lu Qin smiled and said, Qin Pingon, don't you catch me and shove the wool to death, okay? Can't the two of us just drink and tell the old story? Qin Pingon twitched the corners of his mouth. Then if you have the ability, don't play with the magical powers of the lotus roots, and use Shiro to spy on the changes in the town and the Luopa mountain. Lu Qin said angrily, didn't you interrupt the clue to Cui Dongshan? It's boring to flip through old accounts. Besides, I'm just bored and I can't do anything. Qin Pingon asked, have you seen Lu Tai? Lu Qin nodded. The lotus flower blessed land is divided into 4. He occupies one of them. He cultivates smoothly and sits back and relaxes. He is more powerful than the dinging back then. He raised a dog in a feng shui place called Furong Mountain. But Lu Taiyin traveled far away and stayed in the Qingming world. Next to the fish market he opened a restaurant with a little girl and the business was prosperous. In other restaurants most of the proprietresses still have the charm attracting bees and butterflies. His restaurant has been poured out. Every day Yingying and Yanyan are women who go there especially. Qin Pingon handed over the empty bowl and said, that dog must have taken a good name. Lu Qin took the bowl, poured another bowl of wine, handed it to Qin Pingon and said with a smile, who said no? Qin Pingon asked, before Mr. Qi and Master Wan, who were the 2 Buddhist and Taoist saints who were sitting in the Liju cave. Lu Qin said, have you ever finished? Qin Pingon said, if you don't want to answer this question, just talk about the previous one. Lu Qin hesitated, probably because he was a Taoist and didn't want to entangle with Buddhism too much. Do you remember that there was a sissy in the kiln worker who likes to buy cosmetic powder? I was confused for a lifetime. A straight waist, a man, ended up scribbled and buried? Qin Pingon nodded and frowned. Remember, he seems to be the uncle of Wu Fu Su, a woman from the Yang family medicine shop. What does this have to do with me being on the road? I heard Lu Xianying said that Sudian in the drugstore, whose nickname is Rouge, seems to be somewhat hostile to him. Qin Pingon. She has always hoped to surpass herself when it comes to practicing boxing. Qin Pingon was confused about this but didn't bother to delve into it. After all, the woman is the disciple of Old Man Yang and she is in the same generation as Li Er and Jing Dafeng. Lu Qin smiled and said, as for the poor man's predecessor, you can ask Li Lu by yourself. As for other things I can't figure it out. Back then when I set up a fortune-telling stall in the small town, there were rules and restrictions except you young people, you are not allowed to trace the origin to anyone. Qin Pingon lowered his head to drink, his eyes were raised, still worried about the battlefield. There is an extra criminal officer Haosu out of thin air. In fact, together with Qi Tingji and Lu Ji, it is completely possible to travel a long distance together, but God knows if this is Lu Chen's calculation. If you are afraid, you will move your whole body if you are afraid and completely disrupt the layout of the Confucian temple. Lu Chen sighed. There are always such things that make people helpless and can only stare at them. If they are mixed up, they will only be accidental. If you don't help, you will feel sorry for them. Qin Pingon withdrew his gaze. So we ordinary masters are not as good at leisurely as Master Lu. We are not tied to the boat and have no worries. Lu Qin grinned and said, today and tomorrow's Lu Qin is naturally a little bit happy, but yesterday's small country lacquer garden official, who also needs to borrow money from the river officials like you, has been shabby and sad. It is often difficult to fulfill your wishes. Things are not free. Fortunately, I am a person who is open-minded, good at having fun in hardship and having fun in it. So every tomorrow of mine is worth looking forward to. Qin Pingon said, I want to learn more from Daochong Lu to cultivate the mind. If you study the mind, don't learn from me. Lu Qin waved his hand, remembering something, and said, Bai has already become a sword repairman. The weather is very big and the world is magnificent. Even my master said that he has a sword immortal to increase his spirit. Qin Pingon nodded and said, listen to what you said. Lu Qin had a sincere expression of sympathy. In fact, we are both first-class players in the matter of naming. It is a pity that I took dozens of Feijian names and made a special trip to Dakshuandu Temple, and Dao Changsun was there to treat the guests. Hospitable, I came to see me from the latrine with my waistband. Qin Pingon asked, is it possible for Dao Chang's son to be among the 14th realms? Lu Qin shook his head. Any Ascension realm cultivator actually has the possibility of harmony, but the more perfect the realm, the higher the cultivation level, the bigger the bottleneck. This is a paradox. Qin Pingon was speechless. When dealing with a few people, he always had some illusions. The first time he met a Liang, at first he always felt like he had met a liar. Every day he kept talking and always felt that a word was inconsistent. If you say too much, you will be knocked down by Zhu He. On the night ship after the war, Wu Shuangjiang sat at the wine table together, politely. At Panshui Ferry, Jing Juzhong, a giant of the magic road, is full of books and business. Then there is this Lu Qin who first met. Qin Pingon never knew what Lu Qin was thinking or what he would do, because there was no context to follow. Lu Qin sighed. Boss Sword Fairy's vision is really good. Everyone felt that the youth of the past years were too dull, too cautious. Only Qin Qingdu could feel that the foreign boy he saw in his eyes was full of energy and vigor. Lu Qin took the initiative to mention the sword repairman who sent Qing Ming far away. Your two friends, Dong Haitan stayed in Xianxia City, but with a fierce temper he never wanted to be included in by Yujing Taoist official genealogy. Fatty Yen went to Sun Daocheng's Dashuan is very confused. The old Yuan Ing Qing Quan led by a total of 16 sword repairmen, followed the hanging mountain to fly to the Qingming world and finally went to each other. 9 of them chose to stay in by Yujing to practice swordsmanship, while Qing Quan unexpectedly went to Wu. Shuangjiang's Suisher Palace also entered the clan genealogy and served as an enshrinement, because the old sword was self-cultivating a secret matter, and the sword box wrapped in cotton was placed on top of the dragon stone in the water outside the crane tower. Qin Pingon, do you know what the real mountain-moving technique and sim-moving magical power are? I also hope Zhang Lu will give him his advice. In my opinion, you are actually proficient in this very early. It is like 2 rooms in a house. Someone is constantly moving things back and forth. Practice makes perfect and it becomes more and more handy. Master Lu is so mysterious he doesn't understand. You will understand soon. Any good thing is not a single flower. After that, the two stopped talking, just drank separately. Qin Pingon was thinking about how to conceal his identity when he really went to Qingming world. Lu Qin was looking forward to how lively Qin Pingon would be when he arrived in the Qingming world. Several descendant swordsmen of the Dragon Elephant Sword sect had previously followed Qi Tingji and Lu Ji to leave the 2 ferry crossings, but Yu Jian was far behind. Under the of Xiao Yunyan and Mrs. Yen Yen, Yu Jian rushed to the city. They all fell on the other city head. Qin Pingon took a long look and nodded to Xiao Yunyan. As for the other swordsmen, most of them knew each other because they had seen a few at the Parrot Island ferry. The braided girl is called Wu Manyan. She is the best in swordsmanship among the 18 swordsmen. Next to the girl is He Qiusheng, a peer who threatens to ask him about swords in the future. Madame Yen Yen stood beside Lu Ji, still feeling a little suspended, so she simply moved to hide behind Lu Ji, trying to stay away from the Taoist priest. She timidly asked, "Who is the Taoist?" Lu Ji nodded, "Maybe there will be a fight. Then you don't care about anything, you just need to run faster." Qi Tingji smiled and said, "Not so." Lu Ji was obviously disappointed. Chao Jun, who had reserved the post of worship at the end of the sect under the Luopa mountain, looked at the young Taoist priest with the lotus crown on his head. In order to avoid a sword light, he could not help but ask Wei Jin, "Why is there another Taoist priest? Come out. Looks at a high level, can't it be Qin Pingan's cheap uncle again?" Wei Jin said, "It is the 3rd head teacher of Bai Yujing. I heard that Master Lu used to set up a fortune-telling booth in Lizhu Cave for a few years. Many young people including Qin Pingon are old acquaintances. I missed my hometown night." Chao Jun immediately retracted his gaze, didn't dare to take another look and was silent for a moment. "If I was born and raised in a small town, I would definitely have a lot of prospects based on my cultivation aptitude." Wei Jin shook his head and said, "Qualifications? Don't talk about this in Lizhu Cave. Just your temper. You met these hidden experts early on. It is estimated that becoming a sword repairer is a luxury. Better or in Lizhu. Working as a kiln worker in the cave or farming in arable land, going up the mountains to chop wood and charcoal, he is unknown all his life and his luck is a little bit worse. Even if he becomes a sword repairman, he will fall into a trap without knowing it." Chao Jun said, No, I remember that there were a few young boys in the town who were stunned and talked more aggressively than me. They started doing things with no regard for their heads, but now they are all mixed up well? Wei Jin said, those people's words and deeds are based on their original intentions. The superiors naturally don't care about them. Maybe they will follow the water. You are different. You are smart and clever. If you fall into the hands of Master Lu, most of you don't mind teaching you how to be a man. Chao Jun was about to retort a few words, and Lu Xin's heart suddenly sounded in the lake of heart. Chao Jiangxianyi is a bold man, and he has to ask a sword with someone in Ni Ping Lane. The poor Wei is just 1 or 2 afterwards and he will be frightened. A young handsome man like you who is as bold as you, goes to the 12th floor of Baiyujing 5th city to be a city or host, more than enough overkill. How about turning around and taking you on a journey and traveling together in Qingming world? Chao Jun was immediately frightened and his heart was unstable, and he replied with a trembling voice, don't dare to teach Lu Zhang. On Lu Ji's side there was also Lu Chen's heartfelt smile and said, Mr. Lu can make a Liang's heart meditate. There really is a reason and his reputation is well deserved. Lu Ji replied, don't think that your surname is Lu, you just have a close relationship with me and you can't fight it. If you look for it you can just say it, don't have to go around. Lu Chen stood up, raised his head and murmured, the road is like a blue sky, I can't figure it out. Bai also has a poem and it's hard for me to walk in a single word. Qin Pingon raised his head and said calmly, the sky has no walls and there is a pedestrian path. The blue sky road, straw shoes, grinding feet. At the Yulongzong ferry, after Qin Sanqiu and Dai Zhang left the ferry, they were already on their way to the Jianqi Great Wall. Before they left their hometown together they traveled to Shenzhou, South Pazuo and Luxiazu. Guest Qing Jiaxian of Yuxian Pavilion on the Taiging ferry, privately reminded the young man who still had grievances. It was not only an instruction from the elders, but also a kind of warning so that he should not take a golden core immortal too seriously, but also don't take a golden core earth immortal too seriously. Yulongzong temporarily holds the cloud sign of the Lord, and is still waiting for Nayland Saihuan to show up to collect the account. At the same time she also hopes that one day she can find the young hidden official and thank him face to face. Over the small town Qin Lingjun saw 3 outsiders and he waited up. Brother Jia in riding Dragon Lane is also a mixed race door, so he went to find the little road boy riding the bull first, seeing his young age. Qin Lingjun was afraid of the rising clouds and driving the fog, and frightened the little Daoist boy, so he pinched the head of the water and gas cloud and fell outside the town. He swaggered to catch up with the man and a cow and said with a smile, friends of Taoism go slowly. The boy with a childlike appearance turned his head and smiled and asked, what's the matter? After a little thought he has learned Aquarius Yayan, which is the Mandarin Chinese. Qin Lingjun raised his head and asked, the Daoist is looking at Mianxing, are you coming to visit the Immortals in Huaihuang County or be a guest? In fact I wanted to say that my friend looked at the noodles tenderly and asked how old he was. It's just not in line with the rules of the world. The young Taoist said, passenger. Qin Lingjun asked straightforwardly, this fellow Taoist, isn't he a legendary ascended realm monk? How to exaggerate, how to come, if you are really a mountain tycoon with a hidden head and tail, your own questioning will be Tong Yan Wuji and you must not care about yourself. The boy turned sideways, sat on the back of the cow facing Qin Lingjun, shook his head and said, naturally not. Qin Lingjun asked cautiously, that's the same as that of Baiyu Jinglu master? Eating a ditch and gaining a wisdom. Why should my uncle Qin eat fragrant and spicy food in this Beiyue area? Of course, it is a long memory and it depends on my brain. The boy still shook his head. Qin Lingjun breathed a sigh of relief, and it's okay if it wasn't for this guy to ride on the back of the cow, it would be fine if he hooked up his shoulders. Qin Lingjun rejoiced, Qiyuan dream butterfly but Sinoma. Ah, this evaluation is good. The young Dao Tong smiled and asked, which saint is in charge of Liju Dongtian now? Oh Sai, did you drink less bar before entering the town? That's half a fellow man, I like it. Qin Lingjun tossed his sleeves and laughed. Sage Wan Qiong, the first swordsmith of our Aquarius Island, is now the founder of Longquan Sword Sect. I am very familiar. You only need to call Master Wan when you meet. Brother to the handle. The boy asked, Sage of the military strategist? Is it from Fengshua Temple or Zhenwu Mountain? For this matter, it is not necessary to derive and evolve the road. Qin Lingjun couldn't help but glanced at the blue bull. It was pitiful, a foreigner who dared to travel across continents and ended up with an unreliable owner. After being rowed all the way, Qin Lingjun wanted to take a shot of the horns. The young Taoist boy waved his hand and said with a smile, don't shoot, my fellow Taoist has a bad temper. Qin Lingjun withdrew his hand and couldn't help but reminded, friends of Taoism, I really didn't scare you. Our small town, hidden dragon and crouching tiger, is full of unknown high-ranking hermits, strolling here, immortal, masterful, all don't fiddle, it's so interesting. Qin Lingjun immediately slapped his chest and said, it's okay. Anyway, if I help to lead the way, anyone will sell you a bit of face. As long as you talk and do things too much, it doesn't matter. If you really want to conflict with others, you should report my name. My name is Lingjunchen and my name is Jingqing. By the way, I have a friend. Now I do some small business and draw Taoist books. It is the true figure of the 5 sacred mountains from the ancestors. It's a bit more disciple. If you don't have this stuff on hand, you can take you to my shop and sell you at a cost price. If my friend makes you half a snowflake, even if I smash the golden sign. The young man smiled and asked, do fellow Jingqing likes to take matters into account so much? Qin Lingjun sighed, what a way, born with a passion for old ways, my master was just at this point and he was willing to take me up the mountain to practice. Dao Tong asked, who is your master? Qin Lingjun chuckled, it doesn't matter if we meet each other in peace, we should be careful, don't try to dig our hearts out, you will be unsophisticated. After that, Qin Lingjun took the young Taoist boy riding a bull and saw the Sulongjing. The disciple Lu Chen's fortune-telling booth was not far from the old locust tree. It was visible from the head up, with sparse branches and lush green shades. The young man raised his head and glanced, and an old locust tree reappeared in his eyes instantly, but in his opinion, although the old tree was whirling, it would be a pity that it would soon disappear and no business would be restored. It's just that the human affairs are so much like this, the sun and the moon are galloping, the years are like a shuttle and the sea is returning to dust. Qin Lingjun asked casually, who do you want to visit for fellow Daoists walking so far? Dao Zhu smiled and said, that one.